I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. I will ask if there is any public comment from the board this evening.
There is.
Mr. Matthews.
I had to stop and get some gas this morning. Stopped down at Honey Farms. Took me, as I was filling the tank, could look across the street, see everything that's going on over at Powell's at the old Padula property. And I just wanted to take a minute to congratulate the Powell family and the company for their expansion, what they're doing over there. They're doing a great job renovating what was the Padula property. It's beautiful. They're getting settled into it. They're moved in, operational. But also just considering, the growth behind them, the fields they're turning over, and their plans to build garages over there. And eventually we'll see their old property get redeveloped, rented out, whatever. So, we talk about commercial development in town. I think that's a fine example of it, that strip in general. Also note that Damon McQuaid had mentioned that they're going to reuse that old historic barn, either on that property or disassemble it and reassemble it on another property, so that will maintain usage here in town. They took actually some of the lumber from the house they couldn't use, and they implemented that and put that into their new building. So a lot of good things going on relative to Lunenburg from that development. And, we often talk about commercial development in town, and, I think we need to stop and remember that it's the folks that own the businesses that invest. It's their employees that make it work, that make these things thrive, and they're solely responsible for the growth in this town. So just wanted to congratulate them on that, and I look forward to many more years with more tax revenue, more jobs in the community, and perhaps more development coming from that. So,
thank you. Any other public comment?
I just want to remind people of the drop-in session on Thursday night from 5:30 to 7. 5:30 to 7:30. This is at the library, at the community room, and this is relative to the Lane property. So if anyone has any questions or they want to go in and just understand the proposal, there will be a drop-in session this Thursday, 5:30 to 7:30 at the community room in the library.
Thank you. And that's a good lead-in to remind everybody that this Saturday, May 3rd, starting at 9 a.m. at the Lunenburg High School Auditorium is our annual town meeting. So everybody should have been mailed one of the warrants that goes over the articles that we will be discussing. Many of our past meetings over the past few months have been about these articles, all different types, budgetary, policy, bylaws, etc. So again, that's this Saturday, May 3rd at 9 a.m. I encourage everybody who's a registered voter to be there. Actually, if you're not a registered voter, you can come too, but especially registered voters, because that's who will be voting on the articles. Other announcements, just to reiterate that our state rep is going to have, our state rep Jennifer Benson will have office hours at Lunenburg Town Hall on Tuesday, May 13th from 5:30 to 6:30 right here in the Joseph F. Bellata meeting room. I'd also like to shout out to our state rep. I hope she is getting better, recovering from an illness, as you may have seen on the news. The Boys and Girls Club has their Lunenburg Townwide Yard Sale. That's for Saturday, May 17th from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. You can rent space at the Boys and Girls Club parking lot, or you can register your house and sell your items on your own property. And for those people who want to shop the sales, you can find some great treasures. There will be maps of the registered houses. Participating in the sale will be available for a $3 donation beginning at 8 a.m. on Saturday, May 17th. To find out more information, you can go to bgcluboflunenburg.org. And spring would not be complete without our yard waste days. Saturdays from, it's already started. It started this past Saturday, April 26th, through Saturday, May 31st, from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Lunenburg landfill area off Youngs Road. Acceptable material are grass clippings, bark mulch, wood chips, leaves, brush, with a diameter not to exceed 3 inches, shrubbery and plantings with the same restrictions. You can bring them in any container, bag, box, barrel, trash can, tarp, flower pot, etc. But those items, the containers bringing the yard waste, must be removed by the resident. Do not bring any household garbage, trash, rubbish of any kind. No materials within the landfill area, be it sand, stone, or gravel, are to be given away or sold. Access will be restricted to the disposal area, and commercial landscapers will not be allowed to dump. It is open to residents only, and travel is permitted only on the town easement, so there's no trespassing on the Tri-Town Landing Development property. Again, Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Any public comment from the public today? Seeing none. We'll move to our agenda. We have a 7:15 public hearing, so until then, do you want to take up order of business number 1, review and discussion and recommendations of warrant articles for the annual town meeting, specifically Article 8, prior year bill?
So last week, I advised you that we did actually have an unpaid bill from a prior year that was related to an injury by one of our police officers. We do have an insurance policy that covers injured on duty claims up to a maximum amount. This is one that reached the maximum and actually exceeded that, and we're just now being made aware that there is an outstanding bill that we are responsible for. So when we reach the maximum of the insurance policy, then we have to pay 100% of the claims above that. So we do have a bill for one claim for some testing in the amount of $570.
Any discussion from anybody about that?
Make a motion, we recommend approval at town meeting?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None. Let's hold off on number 2, because that's a discussion. So minutes. And warrants. Accounts payable in the amount of $70,513.25. Sure, yeah, but let's just finish this line item. Action file issues, any action file issues by anybody? Okay, so let's take the next 5 minutes before the public hearing to go over just assigning the motion sheet. I don't know, we can just, I mean, unless anybody has any objection otherwise, or anybody has any particular, like, affinity for reading any particular one, we can just round robin them, of course. If that is okay with the board. Unless somebody says, no, they definitely want to read one of them.
I just think Article 15, Mrs. Bertram should have the pleasure of.
Well, Brandon Kibbe is going to do that.
Oh, Brandon's on that one?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm an overstep.
Thank you.
Okay, well, all the consent ones, I mean, unless we could assign individuals, but really, I'm sure that's not going to be necessary. So if you want to start with me and then just go down and
Okay.
just round robin it, so
So
I'll do the consent calendar, which takes us to Article 7.
Yep.
Would be Mrs. Bertram. 8 would be Mr. Matthews. 9 would be Mr. Toll. 10 would be Mr. Ebersol. 11 would be, are you writing this down?
No,
Oh,
I got it.
okay.
I was,
11 would be me, 12, Mrs. Bertram, 13, Mr. Matthews. 14 and 15 already assigned.
14, would Mr. Toll like to read 14? Because,
Sure.
okay, as a, all right.
Mr. Matthews, Mr. Toll, right, that works out well. Mr. Ebusol, number 16. Myself, number 17. Mrs. Bertram, number 18. Mr. Matthews, number 19. Mr. Toll, number 20. Mr. Ebusol, number 21. Me, number 26. And Mrs. Bertram, number 29. All the other ones that for those at home, obviously the numbers I've skipped are already assigned by committees or commissions or boards having an article before the town meeting that they will present on their own.
So Article 26 is the amendment to the PAC bylaw, which is actually one of your articles. Is that something you would like me to make the presentation on, or does somebody on the committee want to make the presentation?
We can, I don't have any problem presenting it. As long as you make the slides, I'll talk to
Okay.
it. I mean, I'll just go over the changes. It's not going to be a full-blown presentation. We're just going to highlight what modifications. We're not gutting the whole thing. We're just changing some specifics and adding a few sentences here or there.
Okay.
Okay, so those will all be sent to us in an email, right? When, we should be establishing, excuse me, Mrs. Bertram, we should be establishing a meeting. Can we post to make sure that we are posting for, I think we've addressed most of this, but just as an in case, we should post for an 8:30 meeting
Okay.
at the high school cafeteria? Yes, Mrs. Bertram.
I just want to verify that on the articles that we're passing over, on the motion sheet, you'll give an overview of what the original article was, just for whoever the speaker is, when we actually have, like, for example, Article 29. I moved the town vote to pass over Article 29,
Yeah,
but if you can just put a note as to what it was.
I will, and sometimes the moderator will read it, and sometimes he doesn't, so you just kind of have to pay attention to see what he's doing.
Okay, it's 7:15. We have a public hearing about the administrative organizational plan prescribed by the town charter, section 5-1, subsection B. It was in the Lunenburg Ledger on the 18th. Notice is hereby given that the Board of Selectmen of the town of Lunenburg will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, April 29th, 2014, at 7:15 p.m. to review the administrative organizational plan presented by the town manager in accordance with section 5-1B of the town charter regarding the impending creation of the position of land use director. The land use director would fill the role of planning director / town planner, a new role of economic development director, and also serve as a coordinator of the activities of all boards and departments within the land use group, including Agricultural Commission, Board of Health, Building Inspection, including electrical, wiring, and plumbing, Conservation Commission, Historical Commission, Planning Board, and Zoning Board of Appeals. A copy of the plan is available for review in the office of the Board of Selectmen. The hearing will be held in the Bellotta Meeting Room, second floor, Town Hall, 17 Main Street, Lunenburg, Mass. 01462. Tom Alonso, Chair of the Board of Selectmen.
Mr. Chairman?
Mrs. Bertram.
Before we start the public hearing, I was just looking at the advertisement for the public hearing for Whitetail Crossing, and in the advertisement, although on our agenda it says 7:30, the advertisement says 7 p.m. So I just want to verify if anyone is here for Whitetail Crossing, that we will hold that hearing at 7:30.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so I will hand over the reins to the town manager to describe the plan again, as she has done before at some of our previous meetings, to start off, and then we will open the discussion.
Okay. I think before I go through the plan, I wanted to answer the two questions that were left on the table from the last time we discussed this. There was a question, and both were for town council. The first question was relative to whether or not we actually had to follow the process that was set forth in the charter. Did this meet the threshold of the administrative organization plan under the charter? And the response I got from council, and the reason I didn't get a response right away is because when he initially looked at it, he felt that it was a gray area based on his read of the charter. When I talked to him again today, he said, I still think it's a gray area. And I said, well, attorneys live in gray areas, right? And I live in black and white, so I want an answer. What he said was he thinks that a case could be made for either this is something that's done on an administrative basis. It doesn't meet the requirements of the charter, and it could just be implemented. He said, but you can also follow the requirements of the charter, and he felt that the best course of action long-term was to proceed as if this met the threshold of the charter, because the intent is to create a strong department, a strong cohesive department, and to make sure that there wasn't any, issue about what the authority for this position was. So that is what he had to say. That's really not an answer. That's his recommendation.
Well, I will interrupt there for a second just to say that with that being said by town council, as I said last week, I think if there was any doubt that there is a gray area and that we should proceed with the tack that we have taken by going through the administrative plan through town meeting, as I think first of all, I think it's a strong plan. We have nothing to hide. It's the most transparent, and I think people should really see what we're doing, and it is the best way of involvement. So I certainly am for proceeding with the organizational plan being discussed as an article at town meeting.
Okay. So then the second question was, did we need a bylaw, a corresponding bylaw to go with this if we proceeded under the charter? And his response was that the charter says you have two options. Either you present a plan to town meeting or you present a bylaw. And so the option that we've chosen is to present the plan. So I will just briefly go through the plan. I haven't made any changes to it. I've taken all of the comments to date, and after the meeting tonight, we'll prepare a final document. And some of this is repetitive of what was in the public hearing notice, but this is a plan to create a land use department to be headed up by a land use director who would fill the existing role of planning director, town planner, a new role of economic development director, and also serve as a coordinator of the activities of all boards and departments within the land use group, including the Agricultural Commission, Board of Health, Building Inspection, including the electrical and plumbing inspection functions, Conservation Commission, Historical Commission, Planning Board, Zoning Board. And I made a further note that I think it makes sense for this person to also serve as the unofficial assistant town manager, since we don't have anybody designated in that role. The main benefits that I've identified as for pursuing this is that first, we would have a professional town planner on staff to work with the planning board to update the existing master plan, subdivision regulations, and other zoning regulations to guide growth and development in accordance with community-wide goals. Second, coordination of efforts of land use departments to make the best and most efficient use of resources, less reliance on town council to provide professional level planning advice. Third, a directed effort toward economic development and business retention and expansion. And fourth, a directed effort towards obtaining grants for programs and services and/or to provide assistance, review, and analysis of regionalization opportunities. So then in the plan, it talks about, the different charter or bylaw references to planning director, and how I don't feel that make making this land use director position is going to impact any existing provisions in the charter. The planning board, under section 3-10 of the town charter, talks about powers and duties and appointments, and there's nothing in this plan that would be looking to take any of those duties away from the planning board. The planning director is appointed under section 3-10C and 4-2C of the town charter. There isn't anything in this plan that would change the appointment. And what I've mentioned previously is this person is not only planning director, but also economic development director. So this person would have kind of a two-step appointment, that the appointment to the position of planning director would be by the town manager with the ratification by the planning board, and as economic development director or assistant town manager, or whatever, all of the other duties, that person would be appointed by me with the ratification from this board. So we would still follow that process. I mentioned the reference to the Board of Health. There isn't anything in this proposal that would take anything away from powers and duties of the Board of Health. And I've also provided really a specific exclusion when it comes to talking about supervision of employees, because Board of Health appointed employees have a separate exclusion under Mass General Law. They are separate and distinct from any other employees within the town of Lunenburg. I've also referenced the bylaw, or the bylaw reference to the Agricultural Commission. Nothing in this plan would make any changes to that bylaw for the Agricultural Commission. So there are requirements to follow under the charter for putting the administrative plan together, that I need to consult with the Board of Selectmen and prepare and submit a report to town meeting, and that the Board of Selectmen hold one or more public hearings, which you're doing this evening. I've referenced the notice provisions, which we have met the notice provisions for the public hearing notice. One thing to point out is that the plan that's presented to town meeting is presented in whole, and town meeting either votes to approve it or not to approve it. Town meeting can't amend the plan. Town meeting doesn't have to take any action on the plan. The plan, if there's no action taken on the plan, it becomes effective 60 days following the date of the presentation. So no amendments to the plan on the floor of town meeting. I would say not necessarily any amendments through the public hearing process either, unless they're accepted into the plan. I did detail duties of the land use director, and I won't go through those specifically, but what I did was I combined planning duties and responsibilities of a planning director, added some things in for an economic development director, and added some tasks in for coordination of all of the land use boards. This person is not, as I can't emphasize it enough, is not going to supersede any roles or responsibilities or functions of any of the boards in the land use department, but merely to coordinate the activities to make sure that, when we have a development plan, for example, come in, that everything is coordinated, that so we don't have a situation where we potentially have two boards working at cross purposes, or even in a manner that's inefficient. And I did use the example of one particular development we have had that has been under review for 3+ years, has been in front of every land use board, and over the summer we got into a situation where I was called by town council and said, I think we have some boards that they're both working on the same thing and might not necessarily realize they're working on the same thing. We spend a lot of money in legal services. We spend in excess of $120,000 a year on legal services. I've mentioned before that's far above what any community in this area spends on legal on an annual basis. We have some big cases, but I did a quick review and went through legal bills for the past 3 years and felt that we had about $20,000 a year that we were spending that to me looked like staff providing staff level advice. I don't think it was money, I don't think it was poorly spent, but I think we can have a staff person who can provide that same level of service. Often our counsel is not providing legal advice. Counsel is providing something other, planning advice, which I think we need to just bring that in-house because it would be of more benefit to us. I do identify in the plan that the land use director will maintain direct and functional supervision over the positions of building commissioner, building administrative assistant, conservation commission administrative assistant, conservation agent, which is a contract position, planning board administrative assistant, plumbing inspector, which is a contract position, and wiring inspector, which is a contract position. And again, this person will not have supervisory responsibility over Board of Health staff. I did want to mention that the appointment of all of these individuals will continue to be the way it is today, that the appointment and any related disciplinary action for existing employees outside of the fire department falls under the jurisdiction of the town manager. The fire department is the only department that is separate for hiring and any disciplinary action. So this person is not going to be making appointments to any of these positions. It would be just like any of the other departments where the department head is very involved in the process but is not the appointing authority. And then finally, the qualifications that we would be looking for somebody in this position would be a bachelor's degree in community or regional planning with a specialization in land use, environmental planning or economic development, 10 years experience in a municipal planning department or any equivalent combination of education and experience, preference given to somebody with a master's degree in community or regional planning or related field. This is a master's degree is a very common degree for anybody at a planning director level or higher. So that's not anything that you wouldn't find in most communities. Experience in working with state and federal community development programs, laws, regulations, 40B, historic preservation, which is 40C, economic development, the State Zoning Act, subdivision control law, and Wetlands Protection Act. I did note a salary range of 60 to 85. I expect that we would be paying closer to the top end of that, and that is included in the budget. The recruitment process I'd mentioned just because I've been asked about that. If this is approved at town meeting, we would be advertising for the position in May, reviewing applications and conducting interviews in June, and looking to have somebody appointed and starting on July 1st. As with any department head level position, I've always had members of boards and committees that work with this individual participate in the process, and I would expect it to do the same here. I can't tell you it would be one from every board because I haven't made it that far, but it's not something that's done in a vacuum.
So I'll open the discussion up to the board first, if the board has any comments, questions.
Just a quick question. I know that the current planning director sits on at least one committee. Is there any kind of, by design, is there any plan for this position to be a member of any committee?
Certainly, well, you know, I think the capital planning committee is the big committee. I wouldn't expect this person to be the chair of the capital planning committee. When I started here, it was very common that staff members served as voting members on committees. We've moved away from that model where they serve as liaisons. That would be something, I would think that person would be a liaison to that committee and not a member. That would mean we'd have to look at capital planning because we'd need to figure out how we would get another member, and maybe we have to eventually change a bylaw to do that.
Thank you.
I would support that model, too. I think it's better to have paid employees be liaisons and have people volunteering who really are outside of the scope to be the voting members. I think we've done that for a reason in the past, so. Okay, I will open it up to the public. If anybody in the public has any comments, questions about this plan, please come to the microphone.
Good evening. Matthew Allison, 305 Flat Hill Road. It's no secret, I have had a large problem with the organization of our planning department here in Lunenburg for the large lack of technical professional expertise and abilities. To jump on your question, she was, the planning director was chair of capital planning. They're on the Green Community Task Force. They're the 40R officer for the smart zoning, for the tri-town type planning. One of two members of a technical advisory committee. They were on the open space committee. I believe there was at least one other position. I don't have the paperwork with me tonight. And looking through, I thank you very much for bringing us to this water. This is an excellent improvement on the structure of the town. And I thank you very much, all of you, for bringing this forth. But most of this description is already pretty much expected of the position of planning director. I guess one of my initial questions is the change to the charter designation. It was a change, a bylaw rather than a plan.
The charter calls for 2 ways that, under this section, that the town manager could implement these changes. One is by bylaw, one is by plan.
Okay.
And so this is the plan method.
So the bylaw would be a recorded public document that's...
They're both public documents.
Okay. Would this be recorded then, the plan itself, in some kind of a town text?
Well, it's part of the warrant, so in that regard.
I mean, I've spent many years looking for descriptions of jobs and who's in charge of what and who oversees what and who is supposed to be doing what. And I have found it very, very difficult to find these answers.
Well, I think that a lot of those, and I understand what you're asking, a lot of those predate the charter, so there was no official recording of those. This is actually the first time since the charter that we've actually implemented this section of the charter to do an administrative plan officially. Okay. So everything else was kind of grandfathered when the charter was adopted. That whole structure just came forward.
Okay. So this is new. This is the first time we've done something like this?
Using this section.
Okay. Great. Excellent. Yeah, so basically, the planning board, I'm also a member of planning. I've been on for a year. We found it very, very difficult to function even at a decent level without a director. And I can't say that it was a whole lot different before. But, I mean, to add all these additional things onto the replacement of a planning director who was not very well described as far as delineated duties and responsibilities and roles. I found in my personal opinion that a lot of the Mass General Law designation authority of a board had been kind of effectively removed from that board and placed on an appointed person, which I didn't feel was appropriate. And now it's actually getting worse. Not necessarily worse, but it's broadening the scope of the duties. And I mean, the planning board, we don't meet every week. We meet twice a month, every other week. Our meetings often go 3 and 4 hours. It's just recently, probably. I think that probably covers it. I wasn't very well organized for this, but I think that it's important that we keep a focus on planning rather than even thinking about placing a placard of assistant town manager on this new position. As much as I can appreciate that, I'm sure that the current roles and responsibilities of a planning director would very well easily fall into that, because I can remember many times hearing the previous directors saying, I've sat with the town manager for hours on this. So I guess on that note, thank you again for bringing this this land board director. It's very much needed to coordinate all the different boards, but I would also hope that we could not lose a focus on planning board itself, because again, it is a very important aspect of the town.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I may ask the town manager, so can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by the designation of this person as the assistant town manager?
So my thought really was, in the absence of the town manager, when the town manager is on vacation, or ill, or, absent for a period of time, that this person would serve in that capacity. Right now, when that happens, there are 3 individuals who, in the time I've been here, who I believe have served in that capacity, really for the 1 week that I'm on vacation and I'm out of state. Either the police chief, the fire chief, or I believe the DPW director has. This person would, if this is approved as presented, be the primary person, not doing anything on a day-to-day basis that would be done in my office, but really to have somebody who was always the second person to go to in those cases. Because it is difficult if you rotate. In those departments, police, fire, DPW, those are very large departments. The planning director is somebody, because that person deals with the administrative offices, is probably somebody who is more knowledgeable about the central function of the town, where the police department, fire department, and DPW are separate. So really, it just, nothing on a day-to-day basis, but just to have a designated person to go to.
Okay. Any other comments, public comments, questions about the plan? No one.
I did not mention, I meant to mention that I did send this out to all of the affected departments, the staff and the boards, or at least the board chairs, and asked the chairs to send on to their committees, and did receive just one email back from a member of the Board of Health, and I will just read it so it's in the record. While I support the concept of expanding the planning director's role to include economic development, I'm concerned that making it the land use director is too broad and may even present a conflict of interest regarding expediting development versus safety/protection of resources. I think a liaison role regarding land use matters would be more appropriate.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Ebersol.
Just a clarification to the town manager. The sewer commission is included in this. I know it was not in the original article, or the, and because we brought that up recently. And
Yeah,
we also,
I did mean to go through and just mention the things that had been added since that. So there was a request to include the sewer commission as part of the coordination activities, and the chair of the sewer commission was at one of your meetings and spoke in support of that. There was also a request to include DPW in terms of stormwater management coordination. And then that was it. I mentioned the other items.
I just want to add, there's also a coordination for subdivision, roadway, et cetera. Anything associated with roads is also is going to need to be coordinated with the DPW director. And the other thing that we talked about was the direct functional supervision. The way that it is worded, I think a couple of us had interpreted that would be hiring and firing, and you were going to clarify that within the document.
Yes.
Okay.
As I've said previously, I am in full support of this. I think it really brings together a broader function of the existing position, plus adding the economic development part of it, I think is necessary. And if I had one comment, it would be that the implementation of this, as with any job, it's going to be important that this 2-page, 3-page document, the plan that denotes what the functions and responsibilities are is going to be as whoever the first person is in that position. It's going to be necessary to navigate those waters pretty carefully and to really make the role work. Under these guidelines, I could see that if not properly launched, it could be overwhelming in what that person is asked to do. So it's going to be important for us. I think it's imperative to have a position like this, but I think it's important for us as we implement it. Should it pass a town meeting, as I expect it, I would hope passes a town meeting. It's going to be important for us as a board and for the town manager, and as we implement this with all the other boards, the planning board, especially that we ease somebody into this and really grow the position so it's clearly established what we are expecting. Because anybody who's worked in any kind of large organization knows the worst feeling is not knowing what you're expected to do and then being responsible for it after the fact. So just one, that's the only cautionary thing I would say, because it is very broad, but I think it also it needs to be broad in its scope to accomplish what we're asking it to accomplish. Do we want to vote on this tonight, or do you want to see the final exact wording? I mean, we have heard from the town manager that they'll be included for the things that Mr. Ebersol and Mrs. Bertram mentioned.
I'm good with voting for tonight. One of the things that really hasn't changed much is that the planning director used to hold tech meetings where all these boards and commissions attended and made comments on various subdivisions and other developmental things. So there is a precedence for doing this, and this is documenting the requirement that they actually talk to each other.
I just want to add, we've talked about this before, so we're not getting into it in depth again tonight, but, we've had a number of instances over the years, different developments where something slipped, something had to go back redone, someone had to get caught up with something, led to legal issues. We've, spent a fair amount of money resolving some of those things that could have been avoided perhaps with better coordination. So without a doubt, I support this. I think it's going to pay off in spades. As Mr. Allison noted, if we had more depth, more technical depth in some of the decision-making and advice that the boards get, it will probably simplify things and will surely save us money in the end. So I'm ready to vote on this tonight.
Then I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend approval of the, actually that we vote to approve the administrative plan and recommend approval at town meeting. Because I think we actually have to approve it as part of the hearing and then recommend approval at town meeting. Is that correct, Carrie?
I believe so.
Well, we'll do it in one motion, as you just said there. So we're voting to approve the plan of the town manager and recommend approval for town meeting. I think that's the motion. Is that correct,
That's
Mr.
correct.
Ebersol?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. And I think I will, no further comment. I will officially close the public hearing. I would ask that you please email the final document.
Yeah, I should be
With
able
those
to do that
plans.
tomorrow.
Okay. Okay, at 7:30 is the public hearing for the layout of the public way of Whitetail Crossing. I will, you want to speak to that? Or do you want me to? No. So that is going to be, due to circumstances and presentation of data, we are going to postpone this till the fall town meeting. So this public hearing will not be held tonight, or it'll be opened and closed. But this acceptance of the roadway of Whitetail Crossing will be presented at the fall town meeting.
Just, I will mention, I did speak with the applicant earlier today, and he requested that we postpone this for fall town meeting. And if the DPW director's looking at me, I spoke with him late in the day, and I haven't had a chance to communicate with the DPW director, so
So are these our engineers, or are these the applicant's engineers?
No, these are our
Well, these are
engineers
for
for
our-
other items.
Other items, okay.
Right, the other.
Getting nervous they wasted a trip out here for nothing, but. Awesome, thank you.
For item 4, yeah. So I want to go back to item 2, and it is my recommendation, and of course it could be superseded by the board, but it's my recommendation that we have people out here for a presentation, and this was ambitious to reschedule this, and this was my fault for asking this to be rescheduled, the goals of the town manager and the Board of Selectmen for the week before town meeting, and it really should have been on next week's, and that was my error. We can certainly spend time to talk about it now, but I would recommend that we talk about it next week at next week's meeting when town meeting is over.
I would agree.
Mr. Chairman, my only question on the town manager's goals component as it relates to our evaluation process,
Okay.
just so that we have some feedback on that before we complete the evaluation.
Okay. I appreciate that, and thank you for bringing that up. So obviously, we're going to look to that. So yes, and I appreciate that those really are necessary to do the evaluation. So if you can get those to us after town meeting, as close as you can after town meeting. I didn't say anything.
12 noon on Saturday?
I was really thinking 5 o'clock Saturday,
There
but
you go.
yes, but as soon as we can have them, so we can review them, and then I would ask the board as quickly as after the meeting, after we discuss them, that those evaluation forms come in, so I can collate them and present them. And if you haven't already, you can certainly make your schedule with the town manager to discuss your evaluation.
Not till
with her.
Sunday. No, not till Sunday.
Okay, so thank you for that, and then we are up to item 4, items for review for the DPW Director and World Tech Engineering, and we have 6 bullet points. I will let them discuss them in whatever order they come up, but they are the update on the Lake Shirley Dam inspection and maintenance, update on intersection improvements at Mulpus and Townsend Harbor Road, update on the pavement management plan, and a preliminary project list for the FY14 spring and FY15 summer and fall, if available, an update on the traffic ordinances, an update on sign inventory, and an update on the Chase Road and/or Summer Street if additional information is available. With that, I will...
I was just going to mention, these are all the DPW director's items, but they're not all necessarily related to the engineers that are here, so we'll have to break it up by which ones are for the engineers that are here, to take those up first.
So I will ask the DPW Director to take the microphone, take the presentation.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity. Just bear with us while we get set up. There's an awful lot of information to cover. The length of the presentation will likely be determined by the amount of questions that the board may have. As we get set up, and because we're so close to the election, I want to take the opportunity to thank Mr. Matthews for his service on behalf of the DPW and the work he's done specifically on the building and getting us to that point, and for the things he's done for me personally. With Dave, he spent a lot of time here, has put in many, many hours. Naturally, we haven't agreed on everything, but always came around to the fact that it was not personal, that it was business, and that was very comforting at times when, during this economy, things were very, very difficult. Something I always say is that anybody can be a leader during good times. So it's been difficult times, and thank you very much.
Good work, Jack.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, we're not going to go in the order on the agenda, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
We're going to jump around a little bit and hopefully segue into different things. First thing, I'm just going to tell you about Mulpus Road and Townsend Harbor, the intersection. We have a hard scheduled start time. It's going to be May 19th. Of course, when I say a hard scheduled start time, you know, if it rains or if it snows or if it hails, it might get put off, but we expect to start on May 19th. We expect the construction to last approximately 2 weeks. Apparent low bidder is Powell Sand and Gravel or Powell Excavation right in town. We're pleased with that. And after the Powell organization completes the reconfiguration of the intersection, we're going to take over the job and do the paving in town, simply because it's economics. We get an extremely low price on per ton in place, so we'll break up that. We expect the paving to be very, very fast, a day or two, maybe 3. So we expect, I think maybe the end of May is a little ambitious, but certainly as we start on the 19th, you can expect, weather permitting, that we will be done rather quickly. It's a challenging project, not in terms of the actual construction or the topography, but because of the traffic. So traffic management is going to be very, very important. I'm going to ask that as we get started, either I will come to a meeting or ask the town manager to keep you and the public updated. We'll try to put some things in the paper, signs and everything to reach the public. It's going to be an inconvenience. It'll last a short period of time, and we're optimistic that it's going to do what it's intended to do and to make that intersection much safer than it is presently. So there is if there's a question on that, otherwise we'll move on to the dam, the Lake Shirley Dam. We have just completed the emergency management plan successfully. It's in, we haven't even got the finished publication with the shiny covers and whatnot, but we did get a letter, and I don't know if this was shared with the board, from the National Dam Safety Organization, and I'll just read one sentence. It says, as for the EAP, the Emergency Action Plan, Lake Shirley Dam currently contains all required components for a successful emergency response per 302 CMR 1011. The town may only have to make minor edits to the plan for future yearly submissions. What this means is we're ahead of the curve now. They like our work. We're doing the right thing with our consultant, Stantec, and we hope next year, even though it's a couple of $1,000s, we'll probably have that savings, because we will, for all intents and purposes, if nothing changes drastically, that we'll be able to do our own emergency action plan. Everything's in place, as you can see from that letter from the Division of Dam Safety. In terms of the dam assessment and recommendations, this was done in December of 2013. We are completely compliant, but I will read you a short list of their recommendations. You may recognize some of them as recommendations done, identified previously. On the wave walls, the end of the dam, there's some brush. These are all housekeeping things. Cut the brush, redo some stones on the riprap. The most serious things we have to deal with is that old concrete wall that's right in the front of the dam. We epoxied it in the cracks. We monitored it. It's not moving, but the cracks and the epoxy has shrunk, so we have to redo the joints there. The standing water that was on the downhill side of the dam, I think if you don't remember that presentation, that had the potential for some significant reparation. We've monitored that area. That area has not only not gotten more wet, it has become more dry, particularly during these wet times. So we're optimistic about that. The bare areas and the weeds on top of the dam where people walk, they asked that we reseed those, which we did. We fertilized it. It's mowed by the people on Lake Shirley, so they identified that no bare areas on the embankment slopes were noted during the inspection. What was noted, and we fixed it, or we did a repair on it 3 or 4 years ago, was the walkway between the two earth embankments. That's exposed to all the elements. We did put a layer of concrete on there, concrete product. It's begun to crack, so we're going to stay ahead of that. And lastly, and maybe the most difficult to get to, is on the dam itself, the spillway. There are some vertical cracks. They're not terribly deep, but what we need to do is sometime in August, or when the lake is drawn down, we'll have a specialty vendor get in there and we'll pressurize some epoxy or material or state-of-the-art material that has to go in there. That's the short list, but it is in fact the list. There were some trees planted by one of the neighbors that they're only saplings, but they suggested last time that we have him transplant those. I asked that they put that in writing, just to assist me in the public relations of it. You know, we want to get along with our neighbors down there. We leave some brush on one side for some privacy on the other side. That these people are doing a wonderful job in their property, so nevertheless, they have to move the sapling. So I'm feeling pretty good about that dam. We don't look for problems, but the engineer does, and we're 100% compliant. And I think this is a pretty short list of things to keep up with, and we will keep up with them. Of course, most of these things are done in the dry weather. So we're compliant 100% in terms of our inspections. We do them on as required basis. On the emergency action plan, this is in place. As I said, we'll probably be able to do the next one ourselves. In a sense, no news is good news. Everything's working the way it's supposed to be. I expect Ms. Bertram would like to say something.
I just want to ask when the next inspection is. Typically, because it is a high hazard dam, it would be biannual. So is it expected December of 15? Or, I mean, I know we were late initially because the
2015.
2015.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome. Any questions on the dam? Pretty good report card, I think, considering, you know, where we've come. And once it was turned over to DPW, took us a while to get up to speed. And we have a couple of staff members, and we should give kudos to the assistants, Mr. Wilson and Mr. Patry, who help us there and exercise the gates. Everything's working fine. This is not to say that something, you know, may happen in the future, but for right now, the Division of Dam Safety is happy with us, and we're happy with the dam.
So there's no dam problems?
Excuse me?
There's no dam problems?
I was waiting. We have to have at least one joke like
Gotta
that.
do it.
I think wasn't it Chief Sullivan who said, I got the dam report?
The whole
This
litany.
dam report, it actually went to Sully, which, you know, speaks volumes. He said, I guess we're doing okay, are we? Are we doing what we're supposed to be doing down there? So,
I'm glad you have concrete solutions.
we do have a concrete solution.
Wow. I think that is note to go on to bullet number 2.
Okay, I think that's a couple of bullets. I mean, I don't know.
No more
We're gonna,
3.
we're gonna
No more cracks.
gather some of these bullets together. I'm going to talk to you, before we get into the update on the pavement management plan, the pavement management program, otherwise known as the comprehensive pavement management plan, or whatever we'd like to call it at this time. I want to talk to you about some of the Chapter 90 work. And if you bear with me, I have some copies that I'd like you to have, so you can follow along. I have a few, thank you. I have a few extra. I didn't realize we were going to have such a big crowd. I did get your email today, so I have one especially for you. And then maybe a couple for the press corps. I apologize. I think you've got some extras up there, so when everybody's got one. Does everybody have one?
Yep.
Oh, just enough. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just
Got one extra, Jack.
one extra. Thanks, Bob.
Pump.
Okay. Is there anything more exciting than pavement management?
I'll tell you at the end of this
I can see
presentation.
you all. This is what somebody once told me. You should not do handouts because look at everyone here.
To read it.
Nobody's listening to me. Everybody's looking at the handout.
That means we're looking at the material.
Right. Okay. All right.
Wow.
The first, it's a lively
You
group.
can't be the presenter and the heckler of your own presentation. That doesn't work.
Okay. The first, on the top of the first column is a list of all the revenue that we have. The 122,000, where it says uncommitted, we have we haven't quite finished the job on Northfield Road. We did a section on the, I guess it's the easterly side, towards 2A, and we've done the preliminary work towards the golf course. We expect to finish that Saturday, weather permitting, and then there's some aprons in the whole protocol and process that we go through. So those numbers aren't solid, but fairly solid. So with what we had estimated to do it, we came in about exactly, well, who's to say exactly, we came in about $47,000 under. That with an amount that's around $75,000 that was uncommitted from last year, just because the way the numbers go with the roads that are next in the pavement management plan, we can't like jump to the next road and exceed it. So we're carrying $122,000 presently. In F15, the pavement management plan was granted, and Kerry, I think these are right on the money, $127,000. There was an additional $116,000. Even though the budget has not been passed, I'm going on that. There was $63,000 for the governor's recent allocation titled Winter Rapid Road Recovery Program. We could only hope. $422,000 of our anticipated F15 Chapter 90 allocation, and then whatever we have in the budget at the end of this fiscal year that'll go towards that. Right now, the budget is very fluid. The general highway, being the big brother account, covers some things like vehicle maintenance, other things. So that's not a solid number, but a good number and a good estimate is what we're carrying right now is $850,000. The next line on it is the anticipated road repair expenses in FY15. So we start with the $850,000. Now here's where we get into some discussion, and it's not as straightforward as what we have and where we're going to spend it. I think by now you're all familiar with the Summer Street project. It's approximately a $6.4 million project for those who haven't heard about it, and with Leominster and Fitchburg from Kings Corner all the way to John Fitch Highway. This has been a struggle. It takes time. We've been working on this for many, many years, even before we became vocal and hired an engineer. We're at a critical time in the process right now where in order to move forward with this project, we need to fund more engineering. We knew this was coming. This isn't a surprise. Our next allocation that's required from the Lunenburg's end, and of course Lunenburg has the biggest share in it, is $333,000 for the Summer Street engineering project. We need this desperately. We are either going to make a decision to move forward with this project, or we're going to can it. I mean, I just put it in very simple terms. We're either going to pursue this project, or we're not going to pursue the project. And if we're going to pursue the project in a timely manner, by timely, right now it's out to 2017 to be advertised. If we move the way we're supposed to as a town, if it's your choice not to fund the $333,000, then the next discussion is how are we going to manage to close Summer Street? It's that drastic. If you haven't been down Summer Street lately, I suggest you do. I don't think there's any question of the dire need. The road is almost totally in default, if you will. And I just like your thoughts on this. I'd like to stop here and a little discussion on your feelings, the consensus of the board, and perhaps even a vote if the chairman finds it's necessary to do so.
Mr. Chairman?
Mrs. Bertram.
I couldn't agree more that we need to move forward with this project. And one of the questions that I have, and we touched on it at our last Selectmen's meeting, and I'd just like to get some feedback from the town manager, because this also came up at the planning board meeting. We talk about economic development and economic revitalization. In addition to improving the road, addressing drainage, and addressing the failure of the roadway, we also have an opportunity for economic revitalization in this area, and all of us have recognized that during this project. As the DPW director just pointed out, this is slated for the 2017 tip. And in order to meet the requirements of getting everything in order to be ready for that 2017 tip, we really need to move this project forward. And one of the questions I have is the Tri-Town incentive money. What is the balance of that account, and is it appropriate, and can we utilize those funds to move forward with the engineering?
So we have two separate stabilization funds right now. When we started receiving funding for the Tri-Town 40-yard development, we created a separate stabilization fund. The balance of the two stabilization funds right now equals our 5% target, because we have appropriated money. We appropriated the first chunk of money to to pay for the 25% design of Summer Street out of that. So we reduced the balance there. And then I believe it was in fiscal 12, we appropriated some money out of the stabilization fund for extraordinary unemployment expenses. So the two funds together are the 5%. If we were to appropriate money out of that fund for this project, which we certainly could do, we would fall below that 5%. I can't tell you the breakout off the top of my head between the two funds. I can just tell you that together they're 5% of the operating budget, which is our target. We did, in this current fiscal year, receive $99,000 in zoning incentive funds for building 3 in Tri-Town. I do expect, based on the way the budget is coming together or closing out, that we will have some free cash. I hope it is at least equal to that $99,000, if not more, but I couldn't tell you for sure at this point in time.
The initial payment, and I don't know the numbers, but didn't we receive an initial incentive payment of $300,000 when the project was initially started?
I believe you did.
Okay, so I guess I didn't understand. I know we had put this money in a separate stabilization fund specifically to slate it for improvements within that area. I didn't realize that when we talk about the 5% of stabilization, I certainly wasn't aware that it was the combination of both funds. And that's unfortunate because, we had set this money aside specifically for this area, and this is an ideal project. Because obviously the revitalization of Summer Street directly affects this project and additional projects that are proposed in that area.
Yeah. Well, and we did set it aside, and the 25% design money came out of the zoning incentive stabilization fund, and the money that came out for extraordinary unemployment expenses came out of the regular stabilization fund. We didn't use this this fund for something other than projects over there, but the two draws together were pretty significant because the draw for the extraordinary unemployment, I believe, it was, I want to say, in excess of, or around $200,000. It was very significant.
I think it was in that neighborhood. I feel this is very delicate. Using this, it's a very delicate balance because the project, as you know, Mr. Rodriguez, I have been very much in support of this project because there's, in black and white terms, if we don't get state money to do Summer Street, Lunenburg will never have the money to do it because it's in the millions to repair that road. So we need to attract this, and we need to go forward. On the other hand, we're taking money away from a road system that we all know has severe issues in many spots. So we're just trying to play this big shell game. And I'm concerned that if we spent the money, the state had made a commitment to us that they were going to come through with this. And if all of a sudden I would like to get some assurance from them that should the money get released, whether or not we've paid it already locally, that it would still come to us and somebody wouldn't make the decision, well, they've already paid for that themselves, so the money gets diverted elsewhere. So we have to be very cognizant of that as well. That money we have not been told that money has gone away. It's just that it hasn't been released. And we have to make sure that we are very careful with how we proceed with this while still keeping it forward. That's why it's very delicate how we proceed.
I understand. And can I tell you definitively at this moment as I stand here that will happen? No. But what I can tell you definitively is if we don't spend the $333,000 at this point in time, that we won't get the project at all, and that Lunenburg's part of that project is for at least $4.4 million. And remind you that on the pavement management plan, or within the pavement management plan, since its inception, that Summer Street has been the top of the list, and that we haven't spent, I can't say we haven't spent any money. We have, as the town manager says. But this would seem appropriate to put it towards a project that's at the very top of the list. Mm-hmm. I am also sensitive to the fact that there are some that would rather say, let's take every penny and make it all black. Well, part of our charge as department heads over the last few years to this bleak economy has been to go out and search for alternative funding. Well, I've done that. We found alternative funding, and we found it also on Chase Road, which we'll speak of in just a moment. The fact of the matter is the town has to also make that commitment. So what we're asking you to do is turn the $333,000 into $6.4 million. There is no way we are ever going to do, as you said, and you speak correctly, be able to do Summer Street in its entirety. So we are at a sensitive spot, correct, but if we don't move forward, I can tell you definitively that road will either be closed, it'll be in such disrepair because a layer of pavement or layers of pavement are not going to correct the deficiencies, nor is it going to touch the drainage issues that are there. We've already had road collapses down towards the railroad station. I foresee Jersey barriers down the middle with exits into each driveway, and we pay between the Jersey barriers. That's what you're looking at. And when you talk about economic development, I can't really, I mean, you can see how that isn't going to enhance anything. It's going to be a black eye in the town of Lunenburg. So although our choices are limited, our money is even more limited. So, and with respect to your thoughts on the sensitivity of the issue, I could not agree more. But I could not be more strong in my recommendation to move forward with the $333,000 out of the Chapter 90 funding, if in fact it can't come from another source.
Just one question, if I may ask.
Sure.
Between yourself or Mrs. Bertram, who is of course on the MPO, our liaison to that,
Right.
or a sitting member, sorry. And that is when is the deadline? When does this design phase have to be done?
There are deadlines associated with the project that Trish Domigan from VHB had submitted a timeline, and that is what MassDOT is actually going by, and we're already lagging behind. Because if you look at the initial timeline that she projected, our public hearing should have been in January or February timeframe, for one of our first public hearings. So we're already lagging behind. Now, I do know that MassDOT wants to meet and look at the utilities plan. And that meeting is going forward, which is good, but it's going to be critical in keeping the momentum of this project. It is slated, all of the project is slated to be funded in fiscal 17, but in order to keep it on the tip, and we're having, this tip is very competitive, as I mentioned at our last meeting. So, what I talked about at the MPO meeting was that we are moving forward with the utilities plan, but they want to keep seeing momentum. The tip is revisited every year, but there were certain milestones and timeline that Trish Domigan had outlined to MassDOT, and it's going to be critical that we continue to meet those. And my concern is that the longer we wait to see what the governor is going to do, and I absolutely understand that we don't know what the governor is going to do, as far as the money being in the transportation bond bill, I've talked to Arthur Frost from Mass DOT. I've talked to Brad Harris. I've talked to State Representative Benson, Senator Flanagan. Because the money is in the transportation bond bill doesn't mean it's going to be released. And hopefully we'll know in July whether or not it's going to be incorporated in the capital improvement plan, and all of our representatives are lobbying for it to be released. But if we don't move forward and we wait until fall before we continue moving this project, there is a strong possibility, in my opinion, that we will fall off the tip.
My opinion as well, being close, equally as close to it as Paula. Difficult situation. I understand it.
Okay.
So the $99,000 coming in the zoning fund, that goes to free cash. It's not available this year. It's available FY15 at fall town meeting?
It's potentially available at this fall town meeting.
Okay. So there's really no reason why we can't go ahead with this as Chapter 90, all the while knowing that we want to, those funds come in, we've got to earmark them to reimburse Chapter 90. And then we need to look at other options to work within the budget to see if we can't, if not reimburse Chapter 90, at least free up money for paving, on our own accord. So we've got some time to work with this. I think this has to go forward. I mean, we can't let $6 million go away.
Right.
Can't do it.
I don't want there to be any doubt that that's my position as well. I mean, I just, what I'm saying is that when this is in the budget, so this has nothing to do with the allocation of the coming town meeting. the DPW and the town as a whole, with the town manager, have flexibility in how this gets spent. So I think it's wonderful that that this is in the plan. The 116,000, that was the last minute addition to the pavement management, I think is a good use of that in this project. I think Mr. Matthews makes a good point about the 99,000. So I think that's already over 200. And so, I think it's good that it's in here because we definitely have to keep the project moving, which is why I wanted to know what the deadlines are. All I want to do is trying to work with our state delegation and put on whatever pressure and even write to the governor and if we have to, and request that this is critical for us too. So
we do, and we continually, and you'll hear this from our consultants and another project, we continually walk that line of being persistent and being a pain in the neck. Both Paul and I do that very well. And our consultants do that very well because persistence is key. So we do that, Tom, as well. If I can just jump down one more line. Along the same vein, when Ms. Bertram and I were at Mass DOT a couple of years ago, or maybe it was last year, we were encouraged to provide an application to Chase Road. By Chase Road, I mean from Northfield Road to the Townsend line. They call it a book job, minor engineering, and not 25%, 50, 75%. That's yet to be determined. So what we did, we hired World Tech Engineering, and we've been encouraged that this project is available for federal funding, but not only has it been deemed available, we've passed a large hurdle at the Project Review Committee, which is a gathering of all the staff from the entire state where they review projects, and this got a positive push. So there's a very good chance that we will be funded to the tune of $2.2 million to do improvements, not just paving, guardrail improvements and others. And Ms. Bertram can speak to this because she's been to these meetings, and perhaps Rich, you could speak to it too. It's a similar situation. To pave that section of road, no drainage improvements, no guardrail improvements. There are intersections improvements at West Townsend. There's intersection improvements at Northfield, which there have been some fatalities there. To just pave that stretch would be $500. I think I've got it at $600,000 or $590,000 or something like that. Again, we parlay even though the engineering has not been determined, I'm estimating at approximately $150,000. We parlay that $150,000. We push the project. We've got nothing but positive response from Mass DOT, and we could turn that into $2.2 million, which is another one of our only commercial areas in town, and we could enhance that whole section of town. So yes, is it taking the $130,000 and paving a small section of Northfield Road and feeling good that we've improved that Northfield Road? I get it, I understand that. But if we take that same $150,000 and push this project and push it, and have Paula push it at the MRPC and our consultants push it, it's very likely we're gonna get $2.2 million out of it. So again, it's money well spent. Am I going to tell you I'm going to stand here and guarantee we're going to get $2.2 million? No, but once again, I'm going to guarantee if we don't put up the engineering, we're going to get nothing. And we'll be paving it for $600,000, and 15, 20 years from now, we'll be paving it for another $600,000. So again, it's the same discussion, a similar discussion, but on a different section.
Mrs. Bertram.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with a lot of what Jack said. I do have a little bit of a concern about Chase Road because at the last MPO meeting, and I had sent you an email and we haven't had a chance to talk, but one of the concerns that I have, I couldn't agree more, that the initial investment of engineering for this town on any pavement plan for a federal aid eligible road, we need to do the engineering, because in order to get into the queue to the MPO and to get that 2.2 million or that 6.4 million, it's money well spent, and we should absolutely be moving forward with engineering on projects that are in our radar. However, Chase Road, the funding for that project, while I agree that MassDOT was supportive of the project, when I went to the MPO meeting, it is not in their universe of projects. We actually went through a list of projects, and unfortunately,
let me have Rich speak to that, because it is in their universe.
Okay, because
we didn't get a chance to speak.
Okay.
And I wanted to speak offline, so wouldn't be...
Okay, so after the meeting, they...
Oh,
you've-
let me have Rich, and again,
Okay.
I'll invite Rich Benevento, the president of World Tech Engineering, and you can speak to that.
Okay, thank you, Jack. I usually like to follow like the award ceremony. It's not quite as,
We can have a lot of applause for you if you want.
Exactly. So the project was submitted to Mass DOT, a project need form, project information form, which you're very familiar with, was submitted back in the fall. The project review committee did not have their fall meeting, so they didn't meet until the spring. And the project was approved by the project review committee for $2.2 million. Now, when we say it's approved for, it means it's eligible for federal and state funding, which is a huge step, but it does still take a process. Mass DOT, from my understanding, reached out to the town and said, you should really consider doing this as a book job, if I understand that correctly. They contacted the town originally?
No. Jack and I met. I was aware that Chase Road was on our radar. We facilitated the meeting and asked them if they would consider this as a book job, and we had them come out and look at the road. So we contacted Mass DOT.
And they were in support of that?
And they were in support of that,
As a matter of fact, we have a meeting a week from Friday with the district highway director. Jonathan Gulliver is actually coming out to look at the project. We will follow that meeting with precisely what criteria they're looking for in preparation of a book job. So a book job different than Summer Street. Summer Street, 25, 7,500. In years past, book jobs were reviewed at the district level only. They didn't go into Boston. It was, and quite frankly, Mass DOT district office puts out book jobs all the time. When you see them paving 495 and things like that, usually that's a book job format because it doesn't involve all sorts of design criteria.
Just for the people at home, and I'll be very honest for myself, if you can quickly describe what a book job is so we can follow you.
It's exactly as it sounds. So Summer Street, plans, specs, lots of drawings, that sort of thing.
Hearings.
A book job is just a spec with details in it.
Okay.
So it's a book. And there's an item list, and they put the contract out to bid. One of the things that I will agree with Jack, certainly, I agree with many things that Jack says. In this case, about being tenacious, about pushing your project forward. I've been doing this for over 30 years. As a matter of fact, I was involved when we reconstructed Route 13 here in Lunenburg. You have to be like a hungry dog on a bone. You got to keep pushing it. The consultant's got to push it. The town's going to push it. You got to use your legislators. All of that works in order to get your project moving forward. The thing about the Chase Road project is it's sort of a betweener kind of project. It's not big money. And very often, I should say, we see Mass DOT and the MPO looking for projects because some project that was programmed fell off the vine because you didn't have the right-of-way done, or the environmental wasn't done, or there was some public opposition. So they'll say, gee, we have a few $1 million. What projects are ready to go? What are the easy projects that we can advertise? That happens all the time. This is not something that just Rich is saying. This happens all the time. So much so that, and we're going to talk about this a little later when we talk about the signs, they have Highway Safety Improvement Program money, HSIP money, if you've ever heard of that term, available at the MPO. And I was recently talking to the woman in Boston at Mass DOT that sort of manages this, and we had talked about the sign program that Lunenburg has done and try and improve safety through improving signs, and there may be some money available for that because there's HSIP money available in the Montechusett MPO. So there's money falls off and falls on all the time. With a project like Chase Road, it's a $2.2 million project. It's not a huge money project, although $2.2 million, I think any one of us would say, that's great. I have no problem with $2.2 million. But for a road project like this, that's not a lot of money. So it makes sense, obviously, to try and encourage to move it forward.
Mr. Chairman, I just have to say, I know it's on the radar for Mass DOT, but the tip is compiled by Brad Harris of MRPC. They put together the project list. So when I say it's not on the universe of projects, I attended the last MPO meeting. We went through the 15-18 tip. And the 15-18 tip, unfortunately, is extremely underfunded. And the primary reason for that is because there is a project in Sterling that is it's a project at Route 12 that went from 1.3 million to 6.1 million. And that project is throwing everything off for the 15-18
Sure.
tip. In reviewing the 15-18 tip, we also went through all of the potential projects in the region. And Chase Road was not on that list. And Arthur Frost of DOT, as well as the Secretary of Mass DOT, were in attendance. And I brought up the Chase Road project specifically because I did know that it had been vetted and that does have the support of Mass DOT. And what I was told is that if it is going to be considered as a TIP project, that MRPC needs more information. They need the TIP scoring. They also need to know the project number that's been assigned. So we need to involve Brad Harris into this project beyond Mass DOT, because while we may have support of some of the individuals in Boston, the funding is done by MRPC, by Brad Harris, and then it goes through the whole MPO process with input from Mass DOT. But what he indicated to me at that meeting is it is not in his universe of projects. It is not slated for funding. And right now, because of the problem of funding of the 15-18 TIP, we went through 4 different scenarios, and we cannot fund all of the projects that are already in the 15-17 TIP. So funding for the 15-18 TIP is going to be very, very difficult, and if we want to get it even scored, we need to move forward quickly, and we need to involve MRPC in addition to Mass DOT.
Right. The reason that it's not on the universal list of projects yet is because it's so new. The PRC just met a few weeks ago. As a matter of fact, I have the project number right here. So if I could have my glasses, I could see it. It does have a Progis number. It is in Progis, but because it is so new, it hasn't showed up yet on that list.
Unfortunately, we're going to miss that window. That's my concern. Our next meeting is the second week of May, and by the end of May, we're going to have finalized the 15-18 TIP. So we need to move quickly.
I can send you the number because I pulled the sheet today, and the reason you pull the sheet, you have to have the number for it.
Our intent is to put this out to public comment after our MPO meeting the second week of May. So while it may be new, I just want to caution you that it's not going to be on the 15-18 TIP at this point in time, unless we can somehow bring this information forward. But I don't see it funded on the 15-18 TIP because the intent is to put it out to bid, to put it out for public comment after our meeting in May.
And typically, projects won't make it on the TIP until they get through the preliminary design phase. And the reason they do that is because so many things can happen between when the project's inception and a 25% design public hearing. So typically, a project may be on the universal list, but it's not going to get programmed on a TIP until you get past that public hearing stage. And that's typical of all projects.
Well, actually, Townsend Chase Road, which is also a book job, is already, Route 13 in Townsend is on the TIP, and it's considered a book job. It's a $1.1 million project, and it is on the TIP without any design.
Right, so, and I'm presuming that they're a little further along with the process.
I can't speak to that. I'm just telling, and there are a number of projects actually that are either at preliminary or don't have design.
Sure.
But all I'm saying is, in order to even be considered and to get in the potential funding, even to get in the appendix, we need to involve MRPC and make sure they're aware of that project.
Michael, when we sent in the PNF and PIF, did it also go to Montechusett?
Yes, they do have copies of that, but they need the input from Mass DOT and that project number.
I mean, this is right in its infancy stage. I mean, the PRC meeting was only a few weeks ago. So we're right at the very beginning of this. Typically, again, when it gets to the TIP process, they're not going to consider something on the TIP that's just starting. They want to see that, first of all, there's an investment by the community to get the design, because to get the design finished, that's the obligation of the community, design and right-of-way and environmental. So those things have to be done. And as you're moving that process along, you are then also lobbying with the MPO, Mass DOT, and all the other people that have a say in what projects get programmed and which ones do not. Again, with this particular project, there's often projects that are not on the TIP that get programmed because they're ready and they're looking for a project of this value.
Absolutely.
And that happens all the
Absolutely.
time. So
Absolutely.
I think the good news certainly is that the project was approved by PRC. That in itself is a hurdle, because you can't go anywhere until that happens. That they've approved it as eligible for state and federal money, $2.2 million. And they're anxious to meet with us to review the project. And we'll just sort of shepherd this thing along through the process. If we get a good indication a week from Friday from the district that, hey, this is a good project, we support this project, we encourage you to advance it, then obviously that's a message that, Jack will be bringing back to the board here. And then it's sort of next steps. What are we going to do? Do we want to move forward with this or not?
Good. Thank you, Paula. And thank you for your involvement in that. It's to all of you, we've missed the boat on some things simply because we haven't had an aggressive seat at the table, and Paula has taken that bull by the horns, and we appreciate that effort. Rich has now effectively buried my notes. Thanks, Rich. You buried the format.
Well, just read mine.
Bob, could I have your sheet, please? You can see we work well together. So continuing on, also taking away from that $850,000 is the $63,000 that the governor has distributed to the community. Our allocation that the governor has distributed to the community for such a for a terrible winter, and it's called the pothole program. And this is somewhat outside of the pavement management plan because it's a one-time shot for funding. So the town manager and I have already begun discussions on where this would be best suited, much the same as we did with less money at the end of last year. Certain areas where the pothole activity, and according to our pothole log, which we can use here, it's very effective, where we put the most man hours, the most time, and we can run strips, 100, 200 feet at 4 inches of depth. This $63,000 goes 1,300 feet. So if we were to do a leveler, an overlay, or just a leveler and put it in the appropriate places, we probably would get outside the pavement management plan just this one time, because one-time funding, and we could really do some good things in very, very, very bad areas. There's also $14,000 left in that balance, which we intend to put towards crack sealing. This has been a very effective form of in our arsenal of pavement management. We typically do $25,000 or so a year. So what I expect to do on that 14 is supplement it with our general highway fund, and we'll get up to our $25,000. Future roads, which we figured to be in 16. West Street to Hollis, Leominster, a portion of Leominster Road. Reservoir, and well, for those that aren't reading it out in residence, it's West Street, Hollis to Sunny Hill, valued at approximately $95,000. Leominster Road from Prospect to Kilburn. Now, this is an area where we used our crack seal first. It was our control group. It's given a minimum of 9 or 10 years extra life to that, and it may also be only one layer of asphalt. So the $187,000 may almost be cut in half. We're also going to do a section of Reservoir Road from Flat Hill to a point in Reservoir Road, which is 267. And then Reservoir Road from Goodrich to Flat Hill. Reservoir Road again from the 267 point to Page. And a section of Northfield from Oak Ave to Mass Ave. Now, this all comes up to $930,000, so obviously, depending upon where we put the money above and what we're allocated from the state and what the town manager puts in the operational budget, these are our next list of priorities according to our pavement management plan as it sits today.
So just to be clear, those projects are fiscal 16? The
Yes, ma'am.
West Street, Leominster Road, Reservoir Road, and
Yes, ma'am.
Northfield Road.
Mm-hmm.
And projects for fiscal 15 potentially are the two design, Summer Street, Chase Road, some pothole work, and then I'm not sure if you skipped over White Street and Goodrich Street. Those are the two roads that will.
I did.
will be-
I apologize. I got somewhat interrupted by
I just want to
Rich's
make sure
discussion. Yes.
somebody on Reservoir Road knows what that's a fiscal 16 project, not
Right.
a fiscal 15
I
project.
did skip over. I apologize. We intend to do in 15 White Street from the Fitchburg line to 2A. Now, we're aware that just recently we went to a tech meeting or a review meeting for the Highfields Village project, which proposes to come down Meadow Lane with sewer, and from Meadow Lane onto White Street, and White Street into the existing sewer on 2A. So we're going to look at that very closely, but the engineer told us that even though they're coming back for a re-review because we're changing peer review people, that this is start time is still out around 2017. And he didn't seem solid on that. So before we put any money into White Street, we would look at that closely. But chances are we would come down and do our project, because if we're out 5 or 6 years, it would just enhance what the contractor would have to do. Instead of he has in his documents now to bring it down to gravel, fine grade it, and we will do the paving. This way, if we had a substantial paving base, we could have him just mill it and put another layer on it. So we're not going to do we're not going to perform the cardinal sin of paving a road and having it cut up right away. We're well aware of that, and how far we're going to go on White Street. Also, Goodrich Street from Winter Hill Road. I don't know how many of you peruse that area, but that is easily it rated high on the pavement management plan, and it's also probably one of the worst sections of road in town. And again, with the crack sealing, we'll do that. So thank you, Kerry, for bringing that to my attention. The White Street and the Goodrich Street and the crack sealing will be done in this construction season. And then we'll look at input from the town manager and the board for the engineering fees. We will also look at the $63,000 and expend that, because we're directed to expend that, I believe, by September. And as soon as that schedule is determined, we'll bring those areas to your attention. And just to finish up, as I said, these other roads here are for 16. As in some of the bullets you asked, what did we propose? Well, because the design, again, a good design on the brain, because the funding is so fluid and we're talking about funding, I just brought it out, a half a dozen roads. When you look at the pavement management plan and you look at a better plan, which we're about to get into, an enhanced plan, even though you don't see the priority of the road specifically right now, it's pretty close. I mean, you got 4 pages of roads on a landscape print, and no matter how you tweak the pavement management plan, you're not going to change those first 10 or 20 areas. They're going to remain. They don't heal themselves. So I think with that, and on the second sheet, it's just for your information, folks, it begins with Summer Street, and it's sort of where we've been. We would certainly hope that this list was a lot longer, but I don't have to speak any more on funding right now, but it gives you an idea of just an FYI of where we've been over the last couple of years. So with that, and I certainly appreciate the discussion on the funding and the engineering, and I'm sensitive to the condition of the road, obviously, but sensitive to where the money goes, and I can tell that it even extends further towards stabilization funds and things that I don't typically work with, but it's all one mesh together. And my mantra this year, like every year, we're all in this together. So you can't work in a vacuum, you can't operate in a vacuum. So I'm also sensitive to that. So whichever way we choose to go, we'll do our best.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Ebersol.
And for Jack, the question I have, and I don't know if I'm anticipating your presentation, but the pavement management plan, since it's been a year since we've been on, I haven't seen the plan with the list of the up-to-date list. Will that be something you're going to be talking about tonight?
Yes.
Okay. And
Yes.
somebody could, I'm assuming that's a public record, and therefore any citizen could look and to see where they fit on the plan. Because I've had some people talk about their streets to me, and
Right.
I'd be interested in seeing where that fits on the.
And we're in transition right now, and I don't want to get into that they're going to bring some of that forward, and what we hope to do is make this available to every resident. Click on the link, and you'll see where your road is in the big program. It's not great news, but it is encouraging that we do have a plan. It was time. I told you we'd have to upgrade it. We're upgrading it. And I think I'm just not going to go any further and turn it over to Rich again. And not entirely, but I'm just hoping he hasn't done damage to my pavement management plan. But
I hope not. I hope not. By the way, that number, the Progis number, 607-770.
Thank
Of course, I looked it up on my phone, but then again, it was at the top of the page. I just couldn't see it.
Okay,
But
thank you.
607-770.
Play that number.
So anyway, so we're going to talk a little bit about pavement management tonight. I have to get rid of this little slot. Michael, how do I get rid of this little thing up here? Right here, right? Oh, nope. From the beginning. This has been, okay, here we go. And of course, you know who we are, Rich Benevento from World Tech. This is Mike Pompilli. Michael, wave so they can, Michael, just put your hand up. Hey, there you go. Mike Pompilli.
Well, you guys rehearse.
Yeah, right. Well, we did, but you know. So we do want to recap a little bit about the pavement management program, the benefits of the pavement management program. Already you have it in place. Jack has done, and the DPW have done a fair amount of work in collecting inventory and things like that. But really, the whole idea is to extend pavement life, to get the maximum out of your investments in your transportation infrastructure. Lower life cycle costs, obviously that's really important. Some predictability in terms of what your maintenance costs are going to be, because pavement management is managing that asset, right? It's not all about just fixing every one of your worst roads, but fixing some of your worst roads and also maintaining some of your other roads so that so you get additional life out of them. And the reason we do this, obviously, is to have a better network, a better transportation network, reduce vehicle damage and things like that from roads that are in disrepair. And obviously, as the custodians of your transportation infrastructure, you want to have the best system that you can have. Right? The fundamental goals of pavement management, obviously, is to select the right repair method for an appropriate roadway within the proper time frame. And I'm gonna show you a graph later, and that'll highlight that statement. It's also to maximize the paving condition with the amount of money you have. Towns like Lunenburg, actually not just Lunenburg, lots of towns across the Commonwealth don't have a lot of money to invest in their road system. Some towns rely solely on Chapter 90 money. Other towns make an investment themselves. A good friend of mine is Senator McGee. He's the Senate Chairman of the Transportation Committee, and we talk about this all the time, about local investment versus just solely Chapter 90. It's very, very important. So we're going to talk a little bit about the system specifications, what we did to enhance what DPW had already collected. We're going to talk a little bit about the road inventory in terms of what roads are out there, what roads we found on GIS, Mass DOT's lists, et cetera. The field inspection, a lot of that field inspection was done by DPW. Then we supplemented that by going out and looking at the roads as well to verify what has happened over time. Again, the inspections were done some time ago. It's always good to maintain what the inspections are over time. So you might want to do that every couple of years, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Then what we came up with in terms of the existing condition summary, also very important, the capital plan, and that's what all of you are interested in, as well as Jack, so we can plan on keeping that roadway system in place, at least at some value. And we're going to talk about the value, which is the pavement condition index. You'll see PCI in a few minutes, and that's sort of a standard nomenclature for pavement condition. And then, of course, system maintenance. As we go on, what do we do after this? Well, we have to keep the pavement management system up to date by going out and inspecting those roads again, making sure that you have accepted roads on the list, making sure that those roads get reported to Mass DOT, those kinds of things. So in terms of system specification, it's a non-proprietary system. It's just access. It's an access database using GIS. And that's similar to what we used when we did the sign inventory. So all of this is now residing in Jack's office, and we have the sign program, we have pavement management all on the desktop. So you can pull all this information up and be able to get at it. We can also customize the report. So if we want to know, in terms of pavement management, if we invest this amount of money, how many roads can we do? Or we have these roads, how much is going to cost to fix just them? So we can customize the type of report that we want. And then, of course, preparing a capital plan. It's a tool for preparing a capital plan so that each year, based on how much you have to invest, whether it's just local money or local money and Chapter 90 money, you can plan out what you're going to do. In terms of roadway inventory, we look at several things. We verify the accepted streets in the town. We review that against Mass DOT's roadway inventory, because those don't always match. And then we also compare it to town records. So there's a bunch of data that we look at just to determine, okay, what's an accepted road in the town, what's not. State highway, for example, not an accepted road. Matter of fact, you can't even use Chapter 90 money on state highway because it's not an accepted way of the town. Now, I'm not talking about, like, say, Route 13. That's a state-numbered route. I'm talking about roadways that are under state jurisdiction. So those are the kind of things that we look at. And if you look at this slide right here, you'll see that there are 93.5 accepted miles of town roadway within the town of Lunenburg. There's about 28 miles that are unaccepted, just about 6 miles of state highway, and that gives you about 127.2 miles of roadways within the town of Lunenburg. And if you can see it on that map, it's a little hard to see right here, but the red line, obviously, state highway. The black lines are town-accepted roads, and again, because you can't really see it from there, but we've highlighted all the non-accepted roads in yellow. So if you were able to see this a little closer, you could see which roads those are.
Those miles, lane miles or
Center line miles.
Center line miles, okay.
Center line miles, yeah. Essentially, we're looking at the 93.5 miles of roadway that the town maintains. The inspection reports, they calculate that PCI I was telling you about. This is actually, gosh, I need glasses here. Ford Road, and you can see, hey, thank you. I can see the rings on Venus. These are great. Fort Pond Road, you can see the pavement condition index on this particular road is 17. PCI is a rating system that is 0 to 100, with 0 being the worst roadways and 100 being the best roadways. So if you just paved a road, if you just reconstructed a road, the PCI would be 100. So this particular roadway obviously has a poor rating. We also add newly accepted streets that the town, I heard earlier tonight you were talking about accepting a roadway. Those would be added to the pavement program. Also, we would also contact Mass DOT and let them know that there's some additional lane miles of accepted roadway in the town that ups your Chapter 90 formula and provides more money in Chapter 90 as well.
I'm going to interrupt Rich just for a second. If anybody's picked up on his
Yes.
Fort Pond Road.
That was already paid.
Okay. The whole trigger of this new pavement management program was initiated because every road that we've done, it's all on paper. I have a sheet. What I'll now be able to do is pull up this form on the computer as we pave a road, or should something catastrophic happen to a road. In this case, I notice it's Fort Pond, but this is where we've just overlapped as we get into the new pavement management program. That was just paved, so I'll pull that up. Instead of adding another sheet into a big notebook, do what I have to do, that it's been paved. This will automatically change in the overall picture the prioritization of that road. This was key. This is the database that many of us talked about before. This, to me, is the necessary item. The peripheral stuff, which is important, the reports, and naturally the capital plan, very, very important. But for me, we go out and do a road. I sit down, fill out this, click it in, point and click. Now it reprioritizes that road.
which will change your overall pavement condition index. So based on the results of the inspections that Jack had done and the data he had, supplemented with the data we took, added all that data into the program. So the town of Lunenburg's overall pavement condition index for all roadways is 67. Now, I always get the question, well, Rich, is that good? Is that bad? Well, depends on where you are. There are some communities that would die for a 67. There are other communities that are probably up in the high 70s. So right now, you're at a 67. If you look at the breakdown of what you have roadways that are in the excellent and very good condition area, but you look at the roadways from good down to poor, and those are the ones that obviously need the attention. One of the other things that you need to consider is the roads that are in very good and good condition, there's certain treatments that you want to consider to maintain those levels. So if you look on the right side of the screen, you'll see that the excellent ones, you defer maintenance. You don't need to do anything with those within the next few years because those roads were just done. So that's under the deferred maintenance category. But if you look at very good and good, very good, you might want to be considering some crack sealing over time to maintain that very good condition, or doing just an overlay on the roads that are in good condition. The ones that are in fair and poor, those are the ones that are going to cost a little bit more money, and I'm going to show you a slide in a second as to how that works out. When you get down into the fair and poor condition, more money. The ones that are in the poor condition, I always look at that as, well, Rich, shouldn't we go out and repair all of our poor roads? And I say, no. You want to repair some of them because they're the most expensive to do, and guess what? They've already failed. They're not going to get any worse. Whereas you have roads that are in the very good and fair category that you can maintain and get additional life out of them. And that's really what we want to do, improve the life cycle and increase the life cycle. So if you look at this, if you were to have unlimited funds and you were to say, we want to bring everything up to 100, it would cost you $12.2 million to do it. $12.2 million, and you can see that chart right there. So you can see, and this is what's kind of telling. Out of that $12.2 million, $4.8 million of that would be to construct 10 miles of your roadways, to reconstruct 10 miles of your roadways. Mill level and overlay on your fair condition roadways, 28 miles, 6.3. So the lion's share of that $12 million is really to fix a very small number of your total road miles. That's a lot. That would be a huge investment to get a very little return in terms of how many roadways you're actually going to repair. Versus you see under overlay, crack seal, well, of course, deferred maintenance, there's no cost involved there, but just overlaying and crack sealing, you're maintaining those good and very good roadways for short money relative to the whole scheme of things. The repair methods forecasting, when you're developing your CIP, you can see this curve, and this curve has been, I mean, we use this curve, but this is, so if you Google pavement management, this curve comes up everywhere. And what this curve is telling you is that over time, you can see how fast the deterioration drops off. So at the top, you have excellent, all your excellent roads, deferred maintenance. As soon as you start getting down into the fair and poor category, that curve drops really fast. Which is why when we're talking about within the first 5 to 10 years, you can extend the pavement life on those roadways by doing maintenance activities, whether it be crack filling or overlays and things like that. So it's all about strategizing and prioritizing which roadways you're going to do. One of the other things too, there's a bullet right here, and that's utility coordination. One of the things that really ruin a pavement is utility cuts. And so one of the things when we're doing an inspection of roadways, we'll identify utility cuts. The other thing that's important in terms of forecasting is you may have a list of roadways that are slated. Jack may be developing his CIP. You have a list of roadways that you're going to be considering for improvements. But guess what? Maybe you're replacing a water main on one of those roadways. Those roadways you can pull out and put into the next year in terms of your CIP. So this is, again, this is a tool. Is it the end all? No, but it's a tool in order to be able to forecast how much you're going to spend and which roadways you're going to do. Michael's going to talk a little bit about the CIP that was developed for Lunenburg based on our findings.
So the screenshots that you saw before, the ones that we got the inspection data from Jack, put it into the program, and each different distress type has a weighting associated with it, different types of cracking and rutting, and that generates the PCI, which is the condition of the roadway. We then assign a banding to a repair strategy based on the condition of the roadway. So those roadways with high PCIs, they get deferred maintenance. A little bit lower, then we'd want to do crack sealing to extend the life of those roadways. The roadways that are more in fair condition would just be an overlay, going down toward a mill level and overlay, and then for the lowest PCIs, those would be a reclamation or a reconstruction. So we took these PCIs and developed the capital plan based on Jack's relative budgets for the 2015-2016 roadways. Again, this is a planning tool. Some of these dollar figures aren't exactly going to match what Jack had. What we did, we took his bid prices, put them directly into the program, and calculated a per square yard cost for each repair strategy. And then we include a 7% contingency for traffic management and another 15% contingency for any other work, like berm repair, drainage, maybe some areas of patching on a mill and overlay roadway. So these numbers are based on formulas, not exactly what Jack had in his plan, but they're within the same range. So we're showing for 2015, reconstructing White Street from Mass Ave to the Fitchburg line, Goodrich Street from Reservoir Road to Winter Hill, and West Street between Hollis Road and Sunny Hill Road. Those would be, so the West Street, the PCI is 20, which is right on the boundary of a mill level overlay or a reconstruction. So we left that as reconstruction. I believe Jack has it as a mill level overlay in his plan, but just as a planning purpose, keeping that in there as a reconstruction. So we have about $500,000 in the 2015 plan. For 2016, I'll show you on the next slide.
I just want to add one thing. When Michael's talking about the repair bands that you see, those can be adjusted. So let's say, for example, right now we're saying that if a PCI is 20 or less, it's going to be a reconstruction. You could raise that. You could say, you know what? We want anything from 0 to 25 to be a reconstruction. So those repair bands can be adjusted based on what the town's needs are and what maintenance strategies the town wants to use. So, and that all correlates to the cost. So it all sort of works together. Sorry.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and we can even add in other strategies that the town doesn't have right now in its on-call contract, like a hot in place, which would be a different strategy for repairing roads in the future. So based on this plan, with a $500,000 approximately investment for 2015, and then for 2016, spending about $1 million, you can show what that gets you. So this is based on Jack's existing 2015 to 2019 plan, spending between $1 million and $1.9 million over 5 years, basically maintains that average 67 PCI for the town. So this is really the investment of, ideally $1 to $1.3 million, just to keep your condition overall town-wide accurate. You can see on the bottom table where you're keeping that in that 67 to 68 PCI range for 5 years.
If I can interrupt for a second,
Sure.
I just want to highlight this. This to me so far is like one of the most critical slides.
Yep.
Because the DPW director has been very clear over the past few years as we developed the pavement management plan that just to keep where we are is at $1 million
Right.
approximately. And this chart shows $5.8 million over 5 years, and the PCI overall goes up by 0.7. So that basically indicates that is keep your head at the same level above the water every year with that investment.
Right, you're repairing certain roads while other roads are still deteriorating.
So I just want to, I just want that to be pointed out, because that was a number that was brought about, and I think some people, it raised eyebrows, like, really, we could spend 1.1, 1.3, 1.9 million dollars, and the roads overall, the conditions of the roads don't get any better, they just don't get any worse.
Exactly, Tom. And the irony of this is that obviously we've both worked on it. I developed it myself, and then these folks have worked on it in much greater detail. But on a parallel track, we've both come up with roughly, within $100,000 or $200,000 of the same number, which you identified. Mm-hmm. I've been telling you for years, the number is, the magic number is 1.2 million. And you can see by their research and our research put together that we're right there. No matter how you paint it on a graph, no matter how you want to look at it, what you say is true. Just to keep our head above water, that's what it's going to take. So when we look at, the whole idea of 400 from the state and too much for that, we're in diminishing returns, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, this next slide makes it even clearer. This is a comparison of what your annual investment over 5 years would be, going from nothing, which is the red line on the bottom, which you deteriorate down to under 65, which doesn't look that dramatic, but again, back to that curve where the roads start deteriorating more quickly over time, that if you extend this out 10, 15 years, that would start dropping even more rapidly. The yellow line, which is 1 million per year, keeping it right around the same level. And then if you were to invest 2 million a year, you get all the way up to 72.2 after 5 years.
That box is an empty, by the way, before when it was actually 1.5 million, but it's in white.
Oh, yeah.
Gray on here, so you can see
Yeah.
Yeah, the contrast on the screen back there wipes it out, but it's increments.
By the
of
way,
half
I don't
a
want
million a
to,
year.
not that I want to be picky, but this
Sure.
this slide doesn't really jive with the last slide.
Well, the last slide is based exactly on the capital plan.
Okay.
This is just on average deterioration rate, not looking at actual roadways and what's being improved.
Okay.
Just based on an overall deterioration for a rural suburban community. Yeah, and also the deterioration curves are built in, so as your capital plan goes out, it deteriorates the roadway based on what would be expected without additional inspections. Of course, additional inspections are definitely recommended because roads don't necessarily deteriorate as you expect them to. There's
Linearly.
damage. It's dependent on traffic volumes, which you don't necessarily have all that information in the program either, but it does take that into some account.
Now, I know Rich addressed this a little earlier, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Not in terms of is 67 a good number, a bad number, but obviously this is your industry, and I'm assuming that a number of towns have employing this PCI number. What is of a rural or suburban / rural town the size of Lunenburg? What is a typical?
It's hard to say what that is. It really is. I mean, a lot of them are in the 60s. I think it comes down to what is the expectation of all of you as well as the constituents. So you could say your number's 67 and everybody sitting right here, the decision makers are saying, you know what, our roads are great and 67 is a good number for us. But I think you all know that you have roads that are deteriorating. Now, will you ever get to 100? No. Will you get in the 90s? Probably not. But to go from a 67 to maybe like a 71, that's a huge improvement in your network. Huge improvement.
That's the question I had. Put a different way, it's the same question that Tom had, is how many points do you have to move to perceive a difference where you have a town that the roads stink versus the town the roads aren't too bad, or whatever your
Well, for example, if we're fortunate enough to get the Chase Road project moving and we get that improved, that's a lot of road. That's going to raise that number up significantly because there's a lot of lane miles there, and right now the road is a low number, and you're going to be raising that number. So, but I'm going to answer your question in this way, and that is, it's not so much what number can we get at, it's how much can we invest, and where is that going to get us? because that's really what it comes down to. I could say, gee, 71s, you need to be at a 71, but that's going to cost you $5 million to do that. I mean, if we back up one slide, that's the thank you slide. If you look at the green, in order to get to 72, you would have to be investing $2 million a year. That's a lot of money. Are is the town either A, going to make that sort of investment to get to that 72, or are you going to say, we can't afford that? We can invest the yellow line, which is $1 million a year, and that's going to get us a little higher than we are right now. It really comes down to how much you can invest in your network.
The other thing I'd say, too, is that this is great to get an overall grade, and we're repairing the roads that are going to be able to be maintained with not spending a lot of money, but we are then consciously deciding not to repair the roads that have failed and not fixing them further because they cost more. And so, you would have to spend $4 or $5 million, as you said in your slide, to get the failed roads, which would improve roads, our percentage greatly. But that's where the complaints are coming from, as well as, but by taking care of this, it doesn't seem like this factor takes in the usage. So Lancaster Ave is a big road that almost everybody in towns use as they go in and out of town. So is there a factor for the major secondary or main roads?
Well, so I'm going to let Michael answer that, because it does take into consideration the type of road it is. Local, collector, arterial, that sort of thing. But I want to get back to your first comment. We would not suggest that you completely disregard roads that failed. What we're suggesting is it needs to be a blend. A pavement improvement program should be a blend of treatments. So we're not going to repair every bad road or all the ones in the poor condition. We're going to pick those off a little at a time, while at the same time we're going to maintain what we have. We're not going to wait for the roof to be completely in disrepair, because it's going to ruin the inside of the house. So you're going to do some maintenance on the outside, unless you have to repair the whole thing. It's already failed. Same thing with the roadway. I mean, you're going to repair some of those roads that have failed, while at the same time having a blend of other treatments. Michael, I want to talk about the arterials and so forth.
Yeah, in developing the capital plan, there is a priority factor built in, where main roads get weighted heavier than then secondary roads, collectors, and local streets last. So yeah, definitely when you sort those roads, there's a priority built in where it sort of adjusts there's a PCI times functional class weighting factor that'll put those roads in the right order.
And who determines what that classification for that road? Is it a DOT standard?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those roads have the classification.
Okay, so everybody agrees on
Yep.
the MRPC and everyone would start.
Yeah.
I mean, the road I'm talking about is Howard Street, which in many ways there's some section that I would consider failed, other that, it's going to be a while before you're going to get to that. And so when you look at these different roads, the question is, what's your prioritization for fixing the failed roads?
Right. I mean, and also to piggyback on that, I mean, and this came up when the original pavement management plan, and there's no way around this, is that overall averages are great, but people perceive things by their own neighborhood.
Sure.
And so if you're not in a neighborhood, if you're in a neighborhood that is not a collector road, it's not a main road, and you're having a fair or poor road system, you have to drive that every day.
Oh, yeah.
And you may never see in the foreseeable future a time when that's going to get paved. And so that becomes an issue too, because that has to be part of the blend. You can't expect people, I certainly wouldn't expect people to look at that and say, I understand the whole strategy of blended things and we have to do the main roads, but you know what? I live here, I pay taxes here, I want to have my road done at some point.
Exactly.
Okay, but therein lies the financial component.
Mm-hmm.
They've made it very clear about what it's going to take to be successful at that blend.
Right.
You're not going to have much of a blend at $400,000 a year. We said that from the get-go. We understand, and let's bring this all down to the reality of the Howard Streets and the Watt Streets and the things. And if our overall condition goes up from 67 to 71, we're in wonderful shape. We're not in wonderful shape for the person that lives on Watt Street. It's understood. But the harsh reality is, we've funded it, and we have funded it for the 20 years and beyond at such below minimum that we're in a situation where if you want to get to a good blend over time where many, many things are addressed, then you need to infuse funding for many, many years. We have 127 center miles. We're just not going to be able to take $422,000 and blend across the whole town and make everyone happy.
No,
I'm not saying you're saying that.
I agree
what
with
about the person that lives on that street? Well, that person that lives on that street, unfortunately, we hear that, we're sensitive to that, but those are the poor people that are feeling it the most of decades of underfunding. There's no taking that away. There's no taking that deterioration away. And we can't say, we can have, this is a great program. The report, this is state-of-the-art program, but this program doesn't give us an extra $800,000 a year.
Yeah, press this button, Jay.
This is the basis of the plan. We want plans. We have plans. In fact, it was you and I that had these first conversations many, many years ago. And I dragged my feet until you booted me in the ass, and I finally got the plan here. But yeah, but I like this. I like how this is going, and this is great information. But really, we don't spend enough money. We haven't spent enough money. We can have the greatest plan in the world until we fund it better than we're funding it now, and significantly better.
Well, my one point I want to come back to that I think it was Rich who said, and this would be for people listening to this, and I know people on the board know this too, is that really it's funded to the level that people have decided they wish to accept. And that's what it comes down to. It's at this level, not because people didn't indicate what would happen to the road system if we didn't fund it. That was made clear. Okay, we're here at the level we are at a 67 because that's what people decided was okay. Now, if they decide it's not okay anymore, then we have to make those decisions to change that funding. Because as we see, $5 million over 5 years, 5.8 million according to the previous slide than this one, it just keeps the roads the same. It means they just don't get worse. That's, I think, a critical component to this. So those are the two takeaways that I see really are critical.
I always say roads and bridges are not like fine wine. They don't get better with age, unfortunately. Yeah. So this is, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is really our last slide. And what do we do from here? Obviously, as Jack moves forward, to be updating the data, identifying actual project costs and contractor information. So as time goes on, and he's getting bids, or oftentimes we use the standard bid prices from Mass DOT for this area. Re-inspecting the roadways periodically. We would recommend that happens at least every 2 years. Adding those newly accepted roadways, and again, coordinating utility improvements with the pavement management so that you're not digging up roads after you pave them, which you don't want to do. That's costly. But all of this stuff sort of works together. And that was sort of, we kind of went through a little quick, but because we have other stuff to go through as well with the ordinance and so forth. So,
okay. I'm sensitive to the time. But we do, based on the bullets provided, or the topics that the town manager would like us to cover.
Mr. Chairman,
we need to be thorough.
a couple questions that I want.
I think Mrs. Bertram has some questions before
I just
you
have
move
a couple quick questions on the capital improvement plan slide in comparison to what we went over initially, which was the fiscal 15 and the fiscal 16 plans. basic numbers. It seems to be a discrepancy between the slide, and I think you mentioned it, but it's a large discrepancy, and specifically the fiscal 15 plan. We look at White Street in the slide, it's showing $173,000, and yet in the plan that you presented initially, it was $150,000. So I just want to understand the difference. And the Goodrich Street, you've got 140 in the slide. It's 162.
Okay, you're talking to basically.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think I've got the crux of the question. Estimation of asphalt on these kinds of roads is not an exact science. I give you a length, a width. There's a formula which will give you an overall amount, then times the cost per ton. The $20,000 difference, and we worked on this in different offices. So to be $20,000 within each other is pretty good, because if you figure one of these roads, and I've showed you this on graphics and otherwise, that the road is in such deterioration, the bumps and downs, to profile the road, to level the road over 1,000 feet or 2,000 feet, there's no way to determine if that's going to be 2 inches in some places, 6 inches in another, 4 inches in another. Once you've profiled the road and then go over it with your 2 inches, well, the 2 inches is easy. You can go length by width, because now you have a flat surface. When you do your leveler course, you can be off as tens of thousands of dollars in either direction, because you do a length and a width, and you just simply cannot, if you were to draw a straight edge over all these bumps, much the same as a snowplow, you just can't count mathematically the divots and the depths and the widths of potholes and things that it's going to cover. If you say you want to reprofile the road, you just can't say it's going to be 2 inches or 4 inches for a length of 1,300 feet.
Right,
so therein lies the discrepancy, a large discrepancy in the asphalt number.
Okay, so the difference is in the asphalt number. So you believe the asphalt number is going to be less than what the CIP, in both instances, in both fiscal 15 and fiscal 16. In fiscal 16, it's $81,000 less than the total, the total number.
Again,
so I'm just
for the same reasons I just said.
a little concerned about the low numbers.
But some part of their program has a contingency estimate.
Right, and I actually subtracted the contingency, and
Which
still,
gets-
even without the contingency, we're still under.
White Street gets to be pretty close to the 150
Right,
if you
well-
take
well-
that off. So part of what's good about the contingency estimate is especially in the out years. Because if Jack is doing what he knows this year, you're not going to need the contingency as much this as you will for next year or the year after for unknowns and things like that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Jack has he has excellent bid prices for his on-call, and has a really good handle on the drainage improvements and patching and things that would be involved in each of those. So he can carry a very accurate number for the roads that are in the near term. The capital plan formulas, there's a discrepancy that, for roads next year may look off, but for long-range planning, we do carry those contingencies just to make sure that we have a more realistic number, because we really don't know what the escalation in asphalt is going to be, what the berm repair cost is going to be, what drainage is going to be in there. So the formula itself is really built for a longer term capital plan. So it may look like a discrepancy of 10% or so for roads that are only 1 year out, but again, that's just part of the planning tool.
And then FY16 also has a couple of streets that are not on Jack's. It has Holman Street on it. And since that's in flux right now with all the things going on in that neighborhood.
Right, but Reservoir Road, Goodrich Street to Flat Hill Road, in the plan, it's in Jack's paper, it's 363,000, but in the CIP, it's 150,000. So I'm just.
Well, there's 3 segments of Reservoir Road.
No, I know that, but the segment Goodrich Street to Flat Hill Road, Jack has is $363,000.
I
but
think
the
that was
slide
the road
has
that
it
he
as
was talking about,
150.
whether it was going to be 2 layers or 1 layer. So, I mean,
Well, we're talking about
Right.
the tool. And,
Yeah.
Look, we're in transition right
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
okay? We're at a point right now at this
just trying to understand the numbers.
Understand me. We're at a point right now where we're in transition. These people are taking I'm working on a plan that's 5 years old. I haven't redone the roads, readdress the roads. I'm working on a 5-year-old plan. Those numbers you're seeing from me are 5-year-old numbers.
Oh, so these numbers are from the old plan?
That's correct. My numbers are from
Okay.
the old plan.
That answers the question.
The price of asphalt has sort of leveled off. But as Mike says, we don't know if there's an escalator. Okay? And what these folks have done are working off a more general approach to roadways, lengths, widths, and that. Mine are more specific and built on a 5-year-old plan.
Okay,
So
well,
there are going to be
that's
some.
the answer.
But as we
because these are
transition.
from the old plan.
Yeah, as we transition now and get into the next year, and we put all these numbers together in the database and everything, some of the prioritizations will be tweaked because we're going to change some of the classifications because it seems more realistic. The pavement indexes are going to change. The cost may change, and we'll meld all this together, and our numbers will be one.
Okay. Okay.
One other thing I want to just mention too is certain factors can be included into the program. So for example, in Watertown, Mass, they have an ordinance that anytime you reclaim a road, you have to put in granite curbing and concrete sidewalks regardless. So their linear foot cost price was enormous because when we plugged in the numbers for their capital plan, it had to include all of these other things. So this can be adjusted. If Jack says, you know what, when I do a road, I want to make sure that there's certain aspects of this road that's actually included, other treatments that need to be done, whether it's maybe it's some drainage stuff or a sidewalk or this or that, the numbers can be adjusted to accommodate that. So again, this is where you were looking lengths times widths overlay. That's what it is. Here's the number. But it'll be tweaked as we move forward.
Right. Well, looking at, if Jack's pulling it from the old plan and you're pulling it, that explains the discrepancy.
And be honest with you,
Because
being
in the
within
fiscal
10%,
16,
we were actually
it's
pretty
a pretty
impressed.
pretty big discrepancy.
But it's a big enough discrepancy that I think the plan ought to be to update the 5-year-old data
Absolutely.
before we look at it to make significant decisions.
Right.
Which leads to my question. So
Right.
when do you project that you will be off the old plan and onto the new plan? Do you have a projection when that full transition, obviously it's transition and there's a period, but when do you project when you will be finally off the old plan on this one?
By the time we're here next year, we will be coming to you with another, I would imagine, with another list of roads that we propose for the construction season. These roads that I've proposed and the expenditures for this construction season are going to be consistent with the old plan.
Okay.
As I said before, no matter how we redo this plan or change the numbers, the first block of roads are pretty much going to stay the same.
Right.
Not because of the categorization and things that are involved in making them a high priority. Will the prices change? Yeah, the prices will fluctuate. These are 5-year-old prices. By this time next year, and it won't take that long, we'll transition into the new plan. We'll provide a list of roads that people can look at and say, where am I on there and why? But as we go through this season and project into next season, I expect, at least this season, will be as proposed.
Mm-hmm.
Next season, the numbers may be tweaked slightly.
So
But the roads will not.
by next year, you'll be fully on this plan, the new
I
system.
think prior to next year, I'm hoping that we'll be underway in a seamless transition, if we can call it that, by the time we initiate the capital plan.
Okay.
Because we want to make that, even though the funding may or may not be available, we want to show what the capital plan is. We want to show this information to the capital planning committee over a 5-year period.
So by January,
No, the fall.
The fall.
by fall, okay.
Well, capital plan begins September, October. We should have the
Okay.
database set.
That's all I'm looking
be well
for. I just want to
underway.
know when
We're
you-
just at a point.
And updated too.
Yeah, and updated. We're at the point of getting licensed. We're at the point of getting this right. It's on the computer. We just have to access
I
it.
didn't want, it's not a trick question. I just wanted to know what you projected to be
Yeah.
the
Well, it
full
seems like,
transition time,
you know,
that's all.
I want to say it again at the point of being redundant, that the plan is great, but it doesn't do anything for the funding.
I understand.
Okay.
And when we talk about the paving, I know you mentioned this at the beginning, Jack, but I just want to reemphasize the White Street project, because having attended the planning board meetings, and actually at the last night's planning board meeting, Highfield came up again, and now they're looking at, in addition to the sewer line, also installing a water line at the same time. So the water district has a problem with pressure in that area, so now they're looking at installing a water line as well. So, before we move ahead with pavement, and I know you said you don't, you're going to keep that in your mind when you look
Right.
at the pavement. But I know the proponent of that development is hoping to get all of his permitting done early this summer and to move the project forward to the construction stage, so.
Well, then
just-
then that information changed between last week's tech meeting and this week's meeting at the
All-
planning board. All I can tell you is we're going to be very much aware of that, and we're not, as I said, we're not going to make that cardinal sin to move ahead with
Right.
road reconstruction and be followed by a project. We'll either
Exactly.
stop at a certain spot or we'll move to the next road on the list, and we'll come back to that for obvious reasons.
Right.
I'm done.
Okay,
Anything else on this? No?
we're all set.
The final component here of our presentation is the traffic ordinance. This is something we've been working on for some time, and Mike's going to present that. So you can see we haven't been sitting on our hands. And this has nothing to do with the day-to-day activity of the department.
Really?
So the current Lunenburg traffic rules and orders were adopted in 1970. Passed those out, and they've been amended through June 1985. So we went through this and compared it with the current Massachusetts. Massachusetts has kind of a boilerplate standard town traffic rules and orders to make sure that everything is up to date. So we revised quite a bit of the language in it. And what we're proposing to do instead of an amendment, just to keep it clean, is adopting the draft traffic rules and orders in entirety, which would just be a repeal of the previous traffic rules and orders to bring it up to date. Some of the language in the standard ordinance has changed. Some meanings of traffic control signals, for example. We'd be removing the definition of a flashing green, which is no longer used, adding in a flashing yellow arrow, which is more coming into being. There's language existing in the traffic ordinance that only stop signs and yield signs that have state approval are enforceable. And that requirement was actually repealed in 1986, so we'd want to remove that to make all town-erected stop and yield signs enforceable. The requirements for filing a crash report in the existing traffic rules and orders are for a minimum of $200 property damage. We'd be revising that to be consistent with Mass General Laws, which is $1,000 of property damage. Add in certain definitions, such as funeral processions and ordinance relating to funeral processions. So that's basically the revisions in the actual articles.
And this, as you may recall, was a result of the traffic sign inventory, where a number of regulatory signs within the town were not, for lack of other terms, enforceable through your ordinance. So what we did was we went out and we reviewed all of those ordinances that should be in place based on what you had. And I guess the original ordinance was in 1970 and then amended over years and things like that. But for example, the intersection of Electric Ave and Whalum Road, we know that's a signalized intersection. However, if you look in your ordinance, it's under stop sign control. So things like that that we wanted to correct. And as Michael mentioned, you go through and amend your existing ordinance, or you could just say, you know what, we're gonna get rid of the old ordinance, and we're gonna start with a nice, fresh, clean one that is current and now enforceable. So.
Yeah, and that's where the real changes come into place in the schedules attached to the ordinance itself, which specify the locations of these regulations, which is noted by signs. So to update the schedules, we queried the sign inventory that we completed for the town to find all the regulatory signs and reviewed each one to see if it made sense where it was. So basically, any stop signs that exist, if it's a location where it appears a stop sign is warranted in a safe location, those would be adopted in the new ordinance. Any existing parking regulations would be adopted. So those have been added to the schedules. Like Rich said, some existing regulations that don't make sense anymore were not carried over from the 1970 ordinance, such as stop signs at Electric Avenue and Whalum Road where it's signalized. There are some parking regulations that are in the existing ordinance that don't have signs currently. We did keep those. I think it was Beale Street north of Mass Ave for 1,000 feet, Sunny Hill Road south of Mass Ave for 250 feet, and then also it was one side of Electric Avenue south of West Street for about 350 feet, and also on Skylark Lane on one side of it for 250 feet from Beale Street. So those do not have signs currently, but since they are in the ordinance, there doesn't appear to be a reason not to carry them over. They are carried over in the new ordinance. Other parking regulations that are in the existing ordinance around Whalum Park, we did not carry over since the park's no longer there and they don't make sense. We found 2 stop signs in the ordinance that do not currently have signs. It was at Hamlin Street and on Natick Street where they intersect Whalum Road. There is a stop line painted there, so the signs probably have been knocked down over the years. So we would want to incorporate those in the ordinance and replace those signs. That's basically it for the ordinance.
When would, maybe this is not a question for you, but to the town manager, when would we be expecting to potentially have us adopt these?
Yep.
It's a board of selectmen decision.
Yes,
correct?
the Board of Selectmen.
All right, so we can do it at any point.
Do we have to have a hearing?
Yeah, this, according to Mass General laws, it should be advertised and have a hearing.
Okay.
So part of the thing on the comment, just to let you know, some of those streets, Beale Street, Sunny Hill, go back to no parking as a result of the Buttercup Club, when it was a nightclub that's no longer there. So part of this would be good to get on the website and look at what the different discussions. The other thing I note is that State Highway is not in here, so I'm assuming that state highways and the signalized, the traffic lights all fall under the state regulations. I think it would be good to have that information as an appendix saying not part of the regulations, but for information purposes. For instance, I've been asking this about different stop signs. Is the stop sign for when the traffic lights are out? We want to make sure that those stop signs are there. Is that a legitimate stop sign? I'm assuming the state gives the approval on that part, so.
The MUTCD is very specific about not having stop signs at signalized intersections. You can't do that.
You can't have a stop sign there.
But state highway is a whole different thing in terms of jurisdiction and enforcement. The state law says, in terms of a municipality, because the question has come up, who adopts this thing? It has to be adopted by the ruling body of a community. And I would extend this to a further discussion, and that is there a process in Lunenburg where you adopt regulatory signage? I mean, does someone just come and say, as a resident, gee, I'd like a stop sign at the end of the street, and the board says, okay, and you go put the stop sign up? I mean, if that's what you're doing, you shouldn't do that. I sit on the Parking and Traffic Commission in Beverly, and there's a process. If someone is requesting a regulatory sign, we review it. Our commission is made up of somebody from the planning department, police department, fire department. I'm an at-large person, and I didn't show up for a meeting, so they made me the chairman. And we make recommendations to the city council, because the city council adopts, either chooses to adopt or not, but they go based on a recommendation. I would suspect that this would be reviewed by Public Works, Police Department, perhaps Fire Department, and then make a recommendation to the board and say, yes, this sign should be there. Some signs require a review based on the requirements of the MUTCD. Stop signs need to meet warrants. Four-way stops, there's certain rules about four-way stops. So all of those things. So as you move forward, now that you have this nice, great document, as you decide from time to time to add regulatory signage, the ruling body of the community will have to then vote to adopt, and that becomes an amendment to that ordinance.
Right.
If there are stop signs up that are not in the ordinance, they're unenforceable. Not only that, but they pose a liability for the town because something happens, the first attorney says, who authorized that sign?
Well, that's why I asked the question on the state highway part, does the police department have the list of authorized stop signs or other things on Mass Ave? Because that's the only state highway we have.
Well, there are no stop signs on Mass Ave. Any stop sign on a town street intersecting Mass Ave would be included in the ordinance. Also, turning restrictions onto Mass Ave are also.
Turning restrictions off of Mass Ave, because there's a few of those at some of the intersections.
Typically, that would be, like, for example, the signal at Mass Ave, at Electric Ave, when those signals are installed, there's probably a traffic control agreement that goes with that indicates what those restrictions are.
And where is that agreement?
That resides at Mass DOT.
Okay, I think we should have it. I just don't know what the police have for, failure to make, turning from the wrong lane, other things like that.
Sure.
Because further down on Mass Ave, there's a left-hand turn lane into the shopping plaza Ixtapa that's not signalized. I'm assuming that that's been approved by Mass DOT because it's a state highway. They would have done the work, but.
Right.
Mass DOT did
right,
review
they did.
that
Yep.
I'm just thinking
intersection
about,
and
this is great, and I appreciate the work, I'm looking forward to looking at that, but I'm also trying for the police department to make sure they have all the information handy, which means it's like additional work for you possibly to find that information if the police department doesn't already have it.
Sure, it's something that we could incorporate for informational purposes, even
Right.
though it's not under town jurisdiction.
Mr. Chairman?
Mrs. Bertram.
I want to thank you. I think this is a great report, and I'm looking forward to going through it. And I do think we need to adopt it sooner rather than later. But one question that I have is, attending the planning board meeting, the last couple of planning board meetings, there's been a concern raised about a new entity on Leominster Shirley Road, and I know the police chief was at the planning board meeting specifically to talk about it and concerns about turning, stopping sightline and stopping distances associated with this development. And the point of possibly raising some yellow cautionary signs, those don't enter into this. This is strictly yield, no left turn, no right turn.
Correct.
So it's regulatory, not cautionary. So if we're talking about a yellow sign, that's within the DPW director purview and the police department, correct?
Those are warning signs. So, for
So-
example, sometimes you'll see like a curved line that the road's going to turn,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll see 30 miles per hour orange sign below it, yellow sign. Those are advisory signs.
Okay, so advisory signs.
Right. That's the important thing. They're unenforceable.
Those are
Right.
unenforceable. The other thing is, speed limit signs, the only one that can approve the erection of a speed limit sign is Mass DOT registry. So, did we have any here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this actually, there is a schedule in here with special speed regulations, and those reflect what's on file with MassDOT and what's been approved by MassDOT in the registry, not necessarily what exists for signage, because there are some.
So there's a list in here of speed limits?
Yes.
That have been approved by Mass DOT?
In the back.
Okay.
Yes.
Because one of the questions that has come up in this discussion is, what is the speed limit in that area on Leominster Shirley Road?
Well, that's a different,
But-
that's a different question
Okay, but-
than the signage.
Okay.
Because that one doesn't have a sign.
It doesn't have a sign?
Doesn't have a sign, so it's never gone.
Let's talk about the signs just for a second. The prima facie speed in a thickly settled district is 30 miles per hour, correct? You cannot. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
You cannot erect a 30 mile per hour sign, even if it's the prima facie speed. So you can't just go out and put up a speed limit sign. Technically, when the police department go out and they have the radar trailer and the regulatory sign, the black and white speed limit sign, can't do that. So speed limit signs, there's a lot of restrictions on speed limit signs in terms of putting them up. and getting them approved. There's a whole segment of Mass DOT's requirements that tells you if you want a speed limit on a particular roadway, the process you have to go through. You have to do an engineering study. It has to be the 85th percentile speed is what prevails. So, and oftentimes people say 30 miles per hour, we want to lower it to 25, do a speed study. And you find out the prevailing speed is actually, the 85th percentile prevailing speed is actually 35. That speed limit could actually go up instead of going down. So the speed limit is very, very regulated. Sorry.
Chief Marino and I had a long discussion about this morning, and the timing of this is perfect because he intends to come before the board to speak to you about fees very soon. I don't know what his schedule is, but and I spoke to him about this, before we get to fees, we have to get to enforceability. And that's why it's important that, and we respectfully ask the board to review at their leisure and sooner than later come back and hopefully vote positively on this so we have an ordinance in place, and then Jim can come in and establish his fees with your direction, and it'll be all one solid, legal, enforceable sign matrix.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's, from what I hear from the board, that it will be taken up post-haste after the town meeting and everything.
Excellent. Yeah, the fees in this draft ordinance are directly from the 1981 amendments, so it's what's existing right now.
Yes. I think those are the last amendments, 1982, I think.
The last amendment was 85, but I believe the
okay.
last time the fees were amended was 81.
Right. So,
Yeah.
to answer your question about do we have a process for road signs, I've been on the board 9 years. I don't know that anyone has ever, I don't know that any sign has been added to the town. I'm guessing most likely. Mm-hmm. But I have no knowledge of it, and certainly nothing came before the board. So we'll have to address that. And if you have model bylaws that other towns are using as procedures, not bylaws, model procedures that other towns are using, I would certainly be interested in seeing them.
Sure.
And I'd be
Yeah, I heard you have an in.
We have an in there.
And I'd be interested in, as it relates to the planning board, when they, for instance, the street that will come back to us in the fall, does that have a stop sign or not? I don't know. And is that part of the subdivision review process? How do you make a decision of when you're going to have a stop sign or not?
It should be now.
Right.
Yeah.
This goes back to the land use coordinator.
Yeah.
Well, again, in terms of us, our traffic commission, when projects come in, they're referred to Parking and Traffic Commission to review, not to review, site drainage, but to review traffic and circulation and parking and things like that. If, let's say it was a subdivision and there was it was intersecting a main street, it was going to become an accepted road, now you have a stop sign at the end of that street, the recommendation will go back to the planning board and the city council to adopt that sign as a stop street, and that sign now becomes part of the traffic rules and orders of the city. Those are the kind. I was working with one community, and the planning director was very actually, she was the chairman of the planning board, was very adamant. Oh no! Once the planning board records that at the registry, that sign is law. That's not true. The state law requires it has to be adopted by the ruling body of the community,
Which is
that's
why
all of you.
DPW is an important part of the coordination effort.
Okay.
Great.
So review at your leisure, and then if you have any questions, certainly, Jack can let us know, or if need be, we can come back the night you want to adopt.
Well, I think we're going to need some time to review it.
Sure.
It's interesting reading.
It's very interesting,
Yes.
especially if you can't sleep.
Well, yeah, maybe.
So,
Sure.
thank you for the opportunity
Thank you.
tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to thank you both and Jack for those excellent bullet points. I know that we covered a lot. I know it's been long for reviewing these, but thank you. I think you did an excellent job for those, and continue the good work, all three of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I do not believe we have anything else on the agenda. No executive session. Our next meeting, of course, is 8:30. Before a town meeting, and again, I will announce and remind everybody that Saturday is the annual town meeting at the high school auditorium, starting at 9 o'clock. I know our town moderator, it will promptly start at 9 o'clock. So if you think there's going to be a line to get in, I would recommend that you get there a little bit earlier. And then, of course, we will have a regular meeting next Tuesday, May 6th. Any further public comment from the board? Any further public comment from the public? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Or a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Good night, everyone, and we'll see you on Saturday morning.